Welcome aboard, insomniacs and history nerds. Tonight we're sailing the medieval seas where shipwrights had splinters, sailors had superstitions, and storms had personality. From cozy coastal villages to cogs and carracks that creaked louder than your neighbour's white noise machine, we'll fish, barter, and maybe not get scurvy. We'll even navigate by stars because nothing says sleep like trying to remember which one is Polaris. So fluff your pillows, batten your eyelids, and let's drift chapter by chapter into a calmer tide. Anchors down, let's dream. The sea is never still. Even when it lies flat as polished glass, it breathes, it whispers, it pulls and releases. Along the shore, where land yields to water, life has always gathered. The medieval shoreline is a place of mingled scents, salt and seaweed, tar and smoke, fish both fresh and rotting in heaps. It is a place where gulls wheel and cry overhead, their voices sharp against the soft thunder of waves. To stand upon the beach is to stand at the world's edge, where safety of soil gives way to the restlessness of tide. Here the day begins early. Fishermen rise before dawn, lanterns swaying, boats rocking against their moorings. The tide is watched as carefully as the sky. Children learn to read the sea not in books but in foam, and colour green-grey before a storm, the sudden brightness when shoals move close, the slick calm that warns of fog. Along estuaries, mudflats gleam, slick and treacherous, yet full of clams and mussels. Women wade with baskets, skirts tied high, their laughter carrying across the flat expanse as they dig with hands and knives. Salt is gathered too, for salt is life. Without it, fish cannot be kept, meat cannot be stored. On sunny coasts, shallow pans are dug where seawater is left to dry, leaving crystals sharp and white. Men rake it into small windrows and then into tidy cones, and children help carry it home in baskets lined with rush. In towns, salt is precious, weighed, measured, taxed, guarded. To live by the sea is to live also by salt, for it turns fleeting abundance into lasting provision. Shorelines are never empty. Driftwood washes up useful beams from distant wrecks, twisted roots bleached by sun, planks scarred by teeth of reef. Nets dry on poles, their knotted cords stiff with brine. Boats lie pulled up on shingle, hulls tarred black smelling of pitch. Fish scales glimmer in heaps like coins spilled from some careless hoard. Dogs nose among them, chased away by shouts. Children chase crabs between rocks, squealing when they nip, and women spread seaweed upon fields to sweeten soil. The sea gives not only fish but fertilizer, not only food but timber, not only peril but plenty. There are trades that live only by the tide line. Net menders sit on low stools, fingers flying, repairing the day's tears before tomorrow's dawn. Rope makers twist hemp on long straight lanes, walking backward as cords grow from their hands. Pitch is simmered in iron pots, thick and fragrant, brushed hot into seams. Even the air seems sticky with it. A boy carries a bucket of nails from the smithy. A man in a leather apron fits a new plank to a battered hull. The shore is a workshop as much as it is a border. Yet the sea is never tamed. Medieval folk feared it as much as they loved it. Tales are told of monsters in the deep, serpents longer than ships, whales that overturn boats, mermaids who sing men to their deaths. Sailors swear they have seen lights beneath the waves, or islands that vanish when approached. Priests bless boats before they launch, sprinkling holy water upon decks, asking saints to guard them. Chapels are built upon headlands, their bells ringing over surf to remind mariners that faith must ride with them. The shoreline is borderland not only between land and sea but between safety and peril, faith and fear. On market days the shore grows loud. Fishermen stride in with baskets heavy herring and cod, mackerel striped bright, slippery eels coiling in tubs. Prices are shouted, knives flash, scales fly like mica. Women bargain hard, trading bread, cheese, onions or wool for fish to salt. A cooper rolls empty barrels down the strand, and rolls them back full. A tanner haggles for skins. A monk counts coins for the monastery's Lenten stores. For inland folk who walk to the coast, this edge feels like another country altogether. The tide rules the clock. At flood, boats crowd the water like dark geese. At ebb, they settle on their keels and lean like sleeping cattle. Paths appear across flats only for an hour, stone to stone, stake to stake, then drown again without apology. A careless traveller stands staring as the sea returns the channels like a pack of quick wolves. Those who live here keep pipe by bells and by water both. Shorelines are places of farewell. Families gather as boats push into surf, men wading to shove them clear, women standing with shawls pulled tight against wind. Prayers are whispered, crosses made, last glances exchanged. The horizon swallows ships quickly. Soon only the white line of sail is left, then nothing but sky and water. Farewell may last a day, a month, a year, or forever. To live by the shore is to know longing, to measure love not only in closeness, but in waiting. And shorelines are places of return. When boats appear again, shouts ring out. Children run down shingle, dogs bark, women wave. Nets are heavy, barrels full, or sometimes empty, yet the men are back and that is enough. Salt-stiff sails are lowered, hulls dragged high, catches gutted, and smoke rises from huts as fish are hung and dried. At night the village glows with firelight, laughter and song, the sea itself humming beyond, as if joining in the welcome. Storms redraw the edge without asking. A calm noon turns iron by evening, wind climbs and howls, waves fling weed and timber high into lanes. Doors are barred, lamps are set in chapel windows, and families listen for the thump of a familiar oar against the quay. Morning leaves a different beach, logs where there were none, a new bank of sand, perhaps a broken mast gnawed smooth by surf. The sea keeps its own cartography. Faith threads through all of it. A carved saint stands in a niche above the strand, his paint worn thin by salt wind. Votive ships hang in the chapel like small fleets at anchor. Women light candles when the sky turns strange. Men knot scraps of ribbon to oars in thanks for a safe crossing. Children learn saints' names with the names of winds. Nicholas for mercy, Mary for guidance, the Levant for fair weather, the Black East for trouble. Night changes the shore, but does not empty it. Torches move like little comets along the quay. A watchman's horn sounds twice at fog. The tide gossips to the stones. Far out, a bell hung upon a reef tolls when waves lift it, speaking danger in a tongue everyone understands. Nets darken on their frames, boats creak in their sleep, and stars salt the water with false lights that make even old sailors blink and smile. At the edges of medieval maps where land was drawn fur and seas sprawled blank, scribes sometimes wrote "Hic sunt dracones," here be dragons. But those who lived at shorelines knew better. They knew the sea was not only mystery, not only peril, but also bread, trade, story, and hope. The shoreline was not the end of the world. It was its beginning. Some boats work by moon and lantern more than by sun. Night fishing has its own grammar. A single flame hooded at the bow, a low murmur so as not to spook the water, the slap of oar made small. Eels move then in black cords through reeds, and herring rise glittering to faint light as if summoned. Men read the water by sound, hush that means depth, the chucker that means a shoal, the sudden hushless hole that warns of a current's throat. Nets lifted at night drip stars as much as fish. Seasons write themselves upon the hulls. Spring brings mackerel bright as minted metal, and nets that come up lively and tangled. Summer piles the days long and hot. Tar grows soft, oars blister hands, and salt crusts everything like frost of another season. Autumn means herring in hosts so great that sea turns quicksilver. Barrels fill, smokehouses breathe day and night, and laughter runs even among the weary. Winter hardens everything. Lines freeze, spray ices into long teeth along the gunwale, and few risk the black chop unless hunger has spoken and will not be denied. Tools grow into the hand until they are nearly another limb. The gaff's barb knows the exact second to bite. The bailer's rhythm becomes a heartbeat. The leaded-sounding line speaks in taps along the palm. Knots are little prayers with purpose. Bowline for rescue, clove hitch for calm, reef knot for tempering a sail. Children learn them by touch, in blindfold games, laughing when fingers, at last, remember what eyes have seen 100 times. Mending is as constant as catching. After landfall, the shore becomes a loom, net spread wide, floats like a string of moons, women and old men stooped with needles of bone or brass, drawing the twine through broken meshes with a swift pull and bite that makes a tidy knot. A torn place tells on the sea itself, rock's roughness here, a seal's teeth there, a clumsy haul where weed took the lid line and would not let go. Wood swells, wood shrinks, a split plank is teased shut with oakum and pitch, a sprung rib is nursed with a wet cloth and a prayer for patience. Some coasts give peculiar trades. At river mouths men set eel weirs of woven willow fences in water that guide the night travellers into wicker baskets with a sound like rain. In marsh towns, lampreys are taken by torchlight, their mouths like terrible wheels. Princes crave them, and a good night's run may turn a cottage richer than a season's herring. On rocky headlands, line fishermen stalk conger and ling with baited courage, hauling with 2 hands and 1 curse until the creature shows its pale belly and accepts the boat. Harbour rules and tolls tug at every rope. Guild marks burned into oars show who may sell on which day. A taxman counts barrels with a face that never seems surprised. The abbey's lay brother watches for the tithe of tithe already promised. Smuggling is a shadow that keeps pace with any light. An extra string of fish buried beneath a lawful heap. A barrel of salt walked home under a cloak of night fog. Yet each smugglers cross themselves when a bell tolls for ships overdue. Feast days alter the water. On the morning of the blessing, boats knot together off the quay like a floating village. Garlanded poles rise from bows, ribbons shiver, and a priest in a wool cloak flings salt and holy water together until sea tastes doubly of protection. Names of the lost are spoken, names of the young are given into Nicholas's care, and a silence follows that is cleaner than speech. After, the boats scatter like birds released from a hat. Not all wisdom comes from men. Dogs learn the sea's face and growl when fog has the wrong smell. Gulls' voices sharpen when porpoise chase fish shoreward. Cormorants' wings glisten when they have found the same shoal men seek. Even the colour at the river's mouth, tea of peat, the milk of flood, tells whether salmon will nose in or linger outside the bar. A good fisherman owns many teachers and keeps pride mild. Hazard wears many guises, not only storm. A torn hand festers and steals a strong back for a fortnight. A hook in a foot lays a man useless, and work is balance in the small boats. One missing body feels like a hole in the hull. Rope burns become lines of memory across palms. Sun writes its brown letters upon faces. Cold writes its pale ones. Fish spines pierce, knives slip, barrels crush. So cottages keep vinegar and cobweb. Comfrey salve and clean cloth closes any charm. Trade at day's end has its own theatre. Scales hiss in slant light. A clever girl can tell a fresh eye from a falsified shine, and a careless boy learns why you never stack mackerel under cod. A cart's axle complains, a moneyer licks his thumb and counts slow. The last buyer tosses in an extra onion and calls it fair. Smokehouses open their wooden lips, a dry, savoury breath moves across the lane. The shore smells of profit and labour both. At times bounty is so foolishly generous that laughter turns into work without end. Herring years swell until barrels rise like little towers. Men sleep sitting against them, knives still sticky in hand. The abbey buys 40 casks in a word. A road to inland villages turns white with spilled scales. Then, just as suddenly, the shoals swing wide for seasons, and the same men stare at an empty horizon that looks as innocent as a lamb. The sea teaches humility efficiently. Boats carry the parish in ways a steeple bell never could. A baby has been ferried across to a godparent when the ford ran high. A midwife has been rowed through sleet to a cottage on the far spit. A body has ridden home under a sail used as a shroud. A boat returns from a storm with one oar only, and still is welcomed as if it bore a king. Wood and tar learn the weight of a place's sorrows and its weddings too. Word spreads along the coast faster than a man can walk. A grounded whale 3 bays east, a foreign ship seen hull down with a sail cut odd, a net pattern tried by a Cornishman or a Norman that pulls better in weak tides. News is barter like anything. A shared tip, a loaned coil of rope, 2 hands hauled in another's boat during a lean week. These are banked in the only ledger that matters, the one people keep in their chests. When fog comes, the sea seems to fold in upon itself. Sound grows near and far at once. A bell tolls like a heart inside a wall. Oars thud as if they were in the next room. Men pace the edge of the mist, listening for reef speech, speaking to the water as they would to a frightened child. Steady now, easy now, until a pale wind lifts and the world is returned plank by plank. Sometimes the sea gives unexpected charity. A cask breaks loose from a wreck and drifts in, staved but still sweet with foreign wine. A length of rare timber fetches out, its grain fine as scripture. A ship's rope thicker than any hemp grown here is cut into a dozen blessings. Children find a glass float, strange and perfect, and for a week it sits on the chapel step like a jewel from a saint's sleeve. By winter's deep, when days are narrow and the frost prints stars upon the mud, fishing shrinks to what must be done and no more. Nets are mended in long afternoons, hooks are sharpened, oars are sanded smooth where hands insist they be. In cottages, stories swell like bread at the hearth. The one about the man who rode home with a seal for company. The one about the monk who prayed a storm down to a whisper. The one about the year herring ran up the very street. Such talk is another kind of net, keeping courage from slipping through. And always, at first light, the small boats nose toward water again. Keels grind a little, then lift. Oars dip. The shore lets go. Need rows with them, and hope, and the quiet pride of craft done well. The sea remains master, but the boats ask daily for a share, and sometimes the master nods. In these low hulls, patched and faithful, lies a people's stubborn answer to hunger and to distance. What banners, not boasts, only the long patience of hands, the honest tally of fish, and the will to return tomorrow. Locks are rare, but weirs are common, low teeth of wood and stone that comb the current. Bargemen learn their moods the way shepherds learn gates. Some weirs are friendly, letting boats slide through a notch with a hiss like poured ale. Others snarl, dragging at hulls, demanding poles and curses, and 3 men at the rope. Millers eye the river like proprietors. Water is their wheels' bread, and they argue with bargemen as if the current belonged to both of them at once. Upstream travel is a craft within a craft. When the wind grants a favour, a square sail is raised and the barge noses forward like an ox with new hay in sight. More often, men on towpath lean into the rope until their shoulders burn. In richer reaches, a small, sure-footed horse takes the strain, ears flicking at flies, harness stained with tar. A good tow-beast learns the word for bend and the word for hold, and will stop at a whistle sharper than any spur. Signals carry across the water. A raised cap means shoal ahead, a broad sweep of the arm means keep off, 2 taps on the gunwale ask for room under the arch. At night, a horn answers where sight fails, 1 low note for a barge heavy and stubborn, 2 quick ones for a raft loose and wayward. Lanterns bloom along the bank like migrating stars, white for the ferry, red for a snag, green for a mill race half-gated and mean. Winter writes its own law. When ice takes the channel, barges are moored nose to bank and wrapped in rope like sleeping beasts. Men test the river with poles, listening for the hollow talk of bad ice and the solid thud of good. Some weeks the towpath becomes a sled road. Grain skates downstream on runners greased with tallow. Laughter rings sharper in the frozen air. Then thaw returns with a groan, ice breaking like crockery across piers, and all hurry to free lines before the floes tear wood like bread. Flood is the river's temper. It comes in a night of rain, the banks gone, willows standing as islands, fields turn to brown mirrors. Cottages wake with water at the lintel, pigsties tug at their stakes. The ford moves itself somewhere no one can guess. Barges slip their moorings or are yarded high, by a dozen hands pulling and swearing in the same breath. Later, when water draws back, the land gleams with fresh silt, mud like butter that farmers lift with both gratitude and complaint. There are tolls as sure as bends. At bridges a reeve waits with tally stick and questions. Whose cargo? How much? What weight? What Saint's Day excuses? Coins change hands. Sometimes a bushel of grain compensates for an empty purse. In some towns, barge guilds hold the keys of favour, deciding who may unload at the better steps and who must nose into the reed-choked edge. A shrewd master keeps a small cask aside for such negotiations. River has many mouths to feed. Ferries stitch the banks where bridges never came. A flatboat swings on a chain across the current, the ferryman leaning his pole into the water's steady shoulder, carrying a monk with a mule, a peddler with bells, a bride in a crown of paper flowers that will not last the rain. When floods tear the chain, the ferry becomes a traveller like any other, and neighbours haul it home with cheers as if rescuing a cow. Timber barges are their own nation. Whole forests ride riverward bound for shipyards and beams trunks chained into rafts, crews cooking on hearthstones set atop wet logs, sleeping under shelters that crawl with smoke. At rapids the rafts break and reform. A man who can reweave a forest with iron dogs and rope is welcomed anywhere. In low water the keel barges pretend to be rafts, sliding over shallows with cargo light and oaths heavy. Rivers hum with life beyond trade. Otters glare at men and vanish in neat stitches of water. Herons stand like monks reciting psalms to fish. In spring the banks burst with yellow flags and cowslips. In autumn, mist sits upon reed beds like breath upon glass. Sturgeon occasionally rise like old kings testing their crowns. Children tell tales for years of such a fish. Bargemen pretend indifference, then carve the story into the handle of a knife. Maintenance is the barge's winter mass. Planks are lifted and rebedded, caulking is driven home with mallet and rhythm, pitch boils and smokes like a wizard's pot. Ropes are combed and spliced, oars are planed where calluses complain, a new steering board is hung and tested with a shove. A barge that is loved forgives 1,000 miles. A barge that is neglected seeks the bottom with a traitor's patience. Rivalries steer their own currents. Upstream men curse the careless, downstream who let rafts drift wide. Downstream men laugh about the mountain, fools who think a straight channel lies in every twist. In taverns the boasts stack like barrels, whose crew hauled against the worst headwind, who threaded under St. Martin's Bridge at full flood, who pulled a cathedral stone from shoal and still made market bell. Songs settle the matter until the next ale. Piety travels with cargo. Pilgrims cluster at landings, their shells knocking like wind chimes, their voices weaving hymns with the river's mutter. Processions carry relics to bless the water, a skull bright with silver, a rib in glass, a splinter of wood that no one agrees upon but everyone reveres. Bargemen bow in their fashion, fingers tar-black and devout. A small candle burns at the prow on perilous stretches, guttering but stubborn, as if to teach the current good manners. Danger does not always announce itself. A sunken snag learns a new position overnight and rips a belly with no more fuss than a seamstress picking a thread. A drunk on the towpath slips and is gone under the barge with only one cry. A quarrel at a landing becomes a brawl and then a blood feud whose memory stains a bend for a generation. The river keeps no diary, but people do, and certain places collect stories like silt. At night, the water is a road of whispers. Frogs stitch darkness to itself, owls remark upon trespassers, and the current tells and retells one tale, never the same, always familiar. Lanterns on moored boats throw lazy coins of light. Lovers meet beneath arches where echo repeats their courage back to them. A lone barge slipping after sunset slides as carefully as a cat upon a shelf. Men speak low, poles set without bang, rope paid out like apology. Justice rides the river in small boats and big words. A bailiff boards to count and sees when tax is sour. A bishop's man arrives to ask about the tithe of ale. A sheriff hunts outlaws who think water will hide them. But the river remembers kindness too. A load of stone delivered free to mend a fallen quay. A child ferried across in flood at risk of the crew. A sack of flour slipped at night to a window where hunger had been knocking loudly. Childhood here means knowing the river's grammar before letters. A line cast without tangling is a lesson, a successful splice a prize, a first night sleeping aboard a right. Girls carry bread to crews and learn the weight of a loaf in a moving hand. Boys run messages like water, swift and precise. Some will leave for land work and never return. Some will marry into the barge itself, their lives bound by knotted rope and tide mark. When plague or war stills the banks, the water keeps its own counsel, flowing past shuttered mills and empty landings. Barges lie idle, their ropes shrivelling, their seams drying and sulking. Then, by and by, a cautious load of grain moves, then two, then a raft of timber with a hearthstone smoking, and the towpath grows new footprints. Commerce is shy after grief, but the river coaxes it as surely as spring coaxes willow bud. Festivals belong to the water as well. Candle boats are set adrift on saints' nights, a flotilla of flames sliding under bridges while bells hush themselves to listen. On fair days, painted barges parade, prows dressed in flowers, children shrieking when a bucket is tossed for mischief. A champion polar walks the gunwale from stern to bow without a wobble, tosses his hat, and receives beer and bragging rights for a year. At last light, when work flattens into quiet, a man on the towpath may stop and feel the river speak through rope into bone, a low, steady pull that says purpose without hurry. Smoke lifts straight from cottages, a mill wheel slows to the pace of prayer. The barge drifts in its notch of bank, tugging gently as if dreaming of distance. Tomorrow it will shoulder the day again, not glorious, not swift but certain, bearing the weight of ordinary plenty from one needful shore to another. There is a calendar kept in muscle and mud. Spring opens the sluices and calls timber down from hill foresters. Summer fattens traffic with grain and wool. Autumn loads the decks with apples, hops, and barrels of new ale. Winter shortens days so sharply that men pace their work to the sun's small coin. Saints' feasts mark busy landings, Martin for wine, Andrew for herring, Nicholas for gifts to river chapels. The towpart keeps these dates without ink. It remembers them in ruts and footprints. Food aboard is plain and honest. A heel of rye that tastes of last year's smoke, onions strong enough to argue back, cheese wrapped in cloth rubbed with salt. A pot hooks over a brazier when the wind is kind. Cabbage and a sliver of bacon become soup that warms fingers as much as bellies. In high summer, cress is cut from the bank and trout bought from a boy with a wicker creel. In lean months, dried peas drum the pot like small weather. Tea is a rumour from far ports. Here, comfort is a hot crust and a shared knife. River lore lives in mouths more than scrolls. Yield to the laden, old men say, and keep your tongue where the reeve can't tax it. Rite of passage is argued with gestures, debts remembered by faces, a broken oar paid back with a coil of good rope, a lost pole forgiven because a man jumped to save a child. If judgment must be inked, the guild writes it on parchment sanded with pumice, then tacks it to a post where everyone may pretend to read, and no one can pretend not to know. Bridges are both blessing and hazard. Their piers split the flow into sly knives. Their arches frame the world into brief pictures. A white goose, a red cap, a cloud the size of a loaf. On fast water, passing under is a prayer wrapped in timing. Boys sit above with legs dangling, trading dares for pennies. Beggars anchor at the shade line. Merchants sew charms to bundles so the river will pretend not to notice their value. Each bridge keeps a small museum in its weed. Lost hats, a shoe with one nail, a pilgrim's staff that found a shorter road. Scribes of the water carry stories farther than goods. A minstrel with a cracked lute travels 3 towns on one tune. A letter rides under tarred cloth to a girl who reads by candle and smiles in secret. News outruns hooves when it chooses a barge. A king sick, a war cooled. A saint's bone that worked to cure 2 villages down. By the time it reaches the last quay, the tale has gathered moss and truths in equal measure, and no one minds which is which. Storm on a river, is it a sea's rage but a quick temper? Thunder claps between banks like a door slammed by God. Rain hammers flat so hard the water seems to bounce back angry. A sudden squall will take a hat, a curse, and, if a man is careless, man. Yet the tantrum passes. Steam lifts off the boards, swallows resume stitching air, and someone makes the joke about St. Elmo borrowing the miller's wheel for an hour. Laughter is a pump that keeps spirits above the surface. Night navigation asks for other senses. The nose learns peat smoke from willow smoke, wet clay from eel slick. The ear takes bearings from the riffle below a riffle, the hush that means a deep glide where poles won't touch. The hand reads the rope, damp tight for fair pull, gritty for a snag, singing for a current that wants argument. Stars are mostly rumour behind hedge and cloud, but one bright planet over the abbey spire becomes a private compass that never fails, until it does, and then the horn does its work. Illness rides the barges lightly, but sometimes sits down heavy. Ague shakes a crew for a week. A cut gone sour blooms red under a sleeve. Remedies are as plain as meals. Garlic pounded with salt, a poultice of river clay and comfrey, a prayer spoken into steam. In worst seasons, a black cloth hangs at a cottage door, and the towpart gives it a wide berth. The river runs on regardless, which is a kind of mercy and a kind of grief. Children find schooling where water meets wood. A girl learns to tally by stacking pebbles for each sack lifted. A boy learns wind by watching how the smoke leans from a cottage 2 bends ahead. They practice knots until fingers to tie in the dark. They pick out the one good plank from 3 that only pretend. When they swear their first towpat oath, the old men pretend not to hear, and the old women pretend not to smile. Saints keep their own ledger of favours. A silver fish hung on a chapel nail for a child spared from drowning. A length of new hemp left on the step for a skipper who came home with a cracked keel and a whole crew. Wax ships sail along the windowsill in Lent, their little wicks making the river of air shimmer. On the day of the blessing, every rope smells faintly of frankincense and hope. Winter fog is the river's curtain. It folds sound, blurs lanterns into moons, teaches caution to the cockiest crew. When it lifts at noon, the world returns, like a play resumed after interval, barges revealed mid-sentence, a dog astonished to find its own bark, a kingfisher exploding from grey into impossible blue. Men laugh at their earlier carefulness, as if fear were a coat easily doffed. The river knows better, and keeps a corner of fog tucked away for tomorrow. And always commerce ties humble to grand. A block of stone from an upstream quarry becomes a bishop's step. A barge of oak pins becomes a ship's ribs. A bundle of rushes cut by a barefoot child becomes a noble's clean floor for feast day. Coins trail back upriver thinner than they came down, but pride runs thick. At the inn, a bargeman can point to a tower, a hull, a hall, and say, "I carried a piece of that, and the ale tastes stronger for it." So the river keeps its bargain with those who walk beside it, work for passage, patience for safety, courtesy for room enough. It will never promise more. But if a man listens, if a woman learns its grammar, if a child keeps its hours, the river will take what they offer and return it as bread, as warmth, as roofs that hold against rain. Day after day, bend after bend, the barge goes on, broad, low, and faithful, bearing the common weight of a world that would starve without it. Salt towns keep their own calendar. Spring repairs the pans, men tamp the dikes with wooden mauls, women kneel to patch cracks with clay, children carry baskets of shells to harden edges. Summer stretches long and white. The workday begins before sun has teeth, and ends when shadows turn blue. In autumn, storms chew at the works, and the pans are left to rest under grey sky. Tools are cleaned, rakes retined, baskets mended with willow. Winter is for counting. Sacks tallied, debts settled, saints thanked for weather that didn't it betray. Tools have names and tempers. The long rake that lifts crust without breaking it, the lighter scraper that draws brine into shallows, the wooden shoe that spreads a man's weight so the salt won't collapse. Each worker knows the feel of his own haft, the song it makes against crystal and mud. Salt picks squeal if forced, a patient hand coaxes. Apprentices learn to read wind on the brine and shadow on the pan. Difference between skim and spoil is often the width of a heartbeat. Smugglers wear the night like a cloak. They come when the tide is fat and the excise man plays dice. Barrels ride under seaweed, sacks under hay. A false bottom rattles only if the road is bad. Women hide cones of salt in bread ovens. Men stitch packets into the lining of capes. Dogs learn to bark at strangers and wag at neighbours. When a raid comes, it is all spilled salt and spilled pride. Afterward, someone leaves a loaf and a wink on a windowsill where the collector's wife will find it. The town keeps its teeth, but it smiles. Salt has its saints. In Brittany they honour Anne. Along the Tagus men lay sprigs of rosemary by a painted Nicholas. On the first harvest day, a priest walks between pans with a bucket of clean water and a brush of thyme, sprinkling edges, blessing hands. A small procession leaves a cone of bright salt at a chapel rail. The sacristan will crumble it into the larder pot all winter long, a pinch in each stew provision made prayer. Whaling crews keep omens the way children keep marbles. A red sunrise means ready the boats. A raven on the headland means mending instead. The harpooner sharpens in silence, spit once to the north, tests the barb against his thumbnail. The boatmaster coys line with the care of a scribe rolling a gospel. A snarl in the tub is a curse waiting to flower. When they shove off, oars kiss water together, and all jokes scatter like gulls. The strike is a ceremony without words. Breath, throw, bite. Then the world becomes a rope burning through hands and a boat skating over skin. Men crouch low, as if the sea were a ceiling. The second iron goes in like a promise. The lance follows like an argument no one wants to make and everyone knows by heart. Blood moves the water, and the ocean smells of iron and thunder. Hats are removed without anyone remembering to remove them. At the try-works, heat is its own language. Blubber is sliced into horse pieces and fed into cauldrons until oil weeps out with a sigh. Flames lick the potbellies, smoke climbs, thick and sour, and marks the sky so far that shepherds name the weather by it. Women skim and strain, pour and plug, wiping rims with rags that will never be clean again. Children carry staves to coopers and learn to taste leaks. Oil on the tongue means work to be done before the barrel thinks of travelling. Shorings are feasts and funerals. When the sea gives a carcass, whole villages come with knives and gratitude. Meat is cut in long, dark banners, tongues are argued over, marrow is a delicacy for old teeth. Bones make lintels, sled runners, and a child's toy carved into a saint. A rib set upright in a churchyard becomes a gate pilgrims walk through for luck. Those who drowned last season are named. Those who returned lift cups and promise not to boast. Seaweed seasons a year as surely as sun. After storms, people rake the tide line as if it were a long garden bed. Kelp is cut, rinsed in tide pools, and laid over walls to dry into crackling ribbons. Burned in low pits, it gives ash that glassmakers court like wealthy uncles, and soap boilers hoard like secrets. Farmers fork weed over hungry soil. Spring barley thanks with smaller gratitude than potatoes will one day shout. On poor land, the difference between thin porridge and a loaf with pride is measured in cartloads of weed. Shellfish follow the moon. Baskets hang ready by doors on the nights when tides pull the sea back far enough to show its cupboards. Fingers learn to twist muscles at the hinge without breaking. Beards, knives slide under oysters with the patience of a locksmith. In richer waters, men dive once, twice, 3 times, feeling with toes for the weight of sponges or the rough promise of coral. A pearl found is a bell rung, neighbours gather, bargain, and applaud. The finder tucks it away as if he were hiding a blessing. Market smells tell the tale before eyes do. The sweetness of new salt beside the tannic tang of whale oil, the green rot of kelp, the clean snap of shells, the sour drift from fish racks, a pepper of sawdust where coopers plane staves. Traders from inland wrinkle noses and open purses. Their carts leave white crusts on wheel rims for miles after. A pilgrim buys a rosary strung with shell and swears prayers will run easier across it. A nun purchases a sponge and says it will scrub altars more gently than cloth. Taxes bite like wind. A king's man measures barrels with a rod that always seems to grow when coin is scarce. A bishop's clerk asks whether Sunday salt is holier and thus costlier. Whalers argue the right of strand. Who owns a beast the sea surrendered on the parish strand? The town reeve smiles like a cat and spreads both hands, one for law, one for custom. Fines are paid, oaths muttered. A cask or two rolls sideways when no one looks too hard. Governance, like rope, holds best when given a little lay. Danger wears many faces. A dyke fails under a moon that seemed harmless. A boy is taken by a wave shaped like a trick. A line wraps a wrist and turns a hand to smoke. A diver comes up wrong and does it wake. A cliff gifts amber to children, and then gifts them a falling stone they do not see. The sea keeps accounts, never balanced for long. Families learn to speak the names of the lost as if smoothing their hair. Work pauses, work resume. Guilds guard trade like hens guard chicks. Salters swear not to thin brine with river water. Try-works vow to boil clean. Divers keep the best grounds as secrets taught only to kin. Marks are stamped into barrels and cones. Counterfeiters are chased and, if caught, made to stand with a lump of false salt in the mouth, until shame salts their tongue. Yet when a storm chews a town, guild doors open and rules soften. Oil and bread go where need points. Rivalry sleeps while roofs are mended. Saints' days put work in procession. On the feast of a patron, salt cones are stacked into small pyramids and crowned with candles. Whale ribs are arched with flowers to make a gate, children run through squealing, nets are hung from poles and sprinkled with holy water. A priest lifts hands, voices answer, gulls wheel as if they too were devout. Afterward there is dancing on the packed sand. Even the sternest harpooner forgets to frown until moonrise. Trade routes weave these small harvests into long stories. A barrel of Biscay oil feeds lamps in a Paris scriptorium where a boy learns his letters by its glow. A stack of Cornish salt keeps lentent fish honest on a hill a month's walk from tide. A coral bead from a Greek diver shines at a Flemish bride's throat. A soap boiler's ash makes clean the hands that count rents in a Lombard ledger. None of these things carry the smell of their making by the time they arrive, but the sea is in them still, quiet as breath. Night along these coasts folds the day gently. A panfield gleams with a ghost of its own work. Try-works die down to red eyes, ropes creak once as they settle, kelp crackles in embers behind a cottage. Inside, lamps bloom with oil wrested from iron, water pots hiss with salted broth, hands rub balm into cuts that will sting again tomorrow. Children fall asleep to stories of beasts larger than barns and crystals small as snow, of luck found and luck demanded, of a sea that pays in coin and also in courage. So the other harvests, white, black, brown and bright, bind coast to coast and season to soul. They look humble beside silk and spice, but they are the grammar of survival, a pinch, a flame, a handful of weed, a shell in a pocket. They keep bread from spoiling, lamps from failing, fields from starving, fingers from forgetting their work. And in every cone piled, every barrel sealed, every basket heaved from tide, the same truth lives. The sea gives, the sea takes, and people answer with craft, with prayer, and with the stubborn art of beginning again. Before any sail can billow, before any mast can creak, before any keel can cut the waves, there are the shipwrights. Their work begins not at sea but in the forest, where oak and pine grow tall and steady. For ships are not born of water but of wood, and wood must first be chosen, cut, seasoned, and shaped by hands that know grain and curve as well as any sailor knows tide and wind. The shipwright walks among trees with an eye sharper than an archer's. He sees not merely a trunk, but the line of a future keel, the sweep of a rib, the bend of a mast. He knows which trees grew straight in steady soil, which bent in wind, which hold strength, which will split. He listens to wood when his axe strikes, hearing whether the heart is sound or hollow. The forest is his first workshop, the echo of axes his first song. Once felled, trees are dragged by ox to rivers or roads, their bark stripped, their sapwood hewn away. Great beams lie stacked, curing in wind and sun, until they are ready to be shaped. Shipyards rise by water's edge, where timbers could be hauled easily to launching. The air smells of pitch and sawdust, of tar boiling in pots, of iron nails hammered bright and ringing. Hammers echo, saws rasp, mallets thud upon wedges. The noise is constant, a rhythm of creation as steady as waves upon shingle. The keel is laid first, a spine of oak long and strong. Upon it ribs are set, curved timbers steamed and bent, forming the skeleton of the ship. Planks follow, fitted tight, nailed with iron, their seams caulked with moss and pitch. Each strike of mallet, each swing of axe, is both labour and prayer. Shipwrights know lives depend on their craft. A loose seam may mean drowning, a weak plank may break under storm. Thus they work with care, with sweat, with reverence. The tools are simple yet mighty. Adzes for shaping beams, augers for boring holes, draw knives for smoothing, mallets and wedges for splitting. Blacksmiths forge nails and spikes by hundreds, their sparks flying into night. Ropes are twisted from hemp, tarred until they gleam black. Pitch is heated in great pots, brushed hot into seams, its smell pungent, clinging to skin and clothes. Shipwrights are as much coated in tar as in sweat, their beards stiff with it, their hands blackened. As hulls rise, children creep near to watch, their eyes wide as planks curve into walls higher than houses. Women bring food, men carry tools, dogs bark at strange new shapes looming beside water. Slowly a ship takes form, prow sharp and proud, sides swelling like ribs of beast, stern rising steady. The air hums with excitement, for each new ship promises more fish, more trade, more journeys, more tales. The village feels larger simply for its presence. When the hull is done, masts are raised tall poles of pine, hauled by ropes, guided by cries, set deep into sockets. Sails are cut from wool or flax, heavy and strong, stitched by women with steady hands. Some are left plain, others dyed bright, some bearing painted crosses or saints' emblems, prayers writ large across canvas. Ropes are threaded, pulleys fixed, rudders hung. The skeleton becomes body, the body becomes vessel. Before launching there is always a blessing. Priests sprinkle holy water across deck, chanting litanies, calling on Nicholas, protector of sailors, and Mary, star of the sea. A small coin may be hammered into mast, a charm buried beneath keel, a sprig of green fastened to prow. No ship leaves yard without prayer, for all know that man's skill could carry it only though far. The sea must be persuaded, or at least placated. The launching is a day of festival. Villagers gather, children perched on shoulders, dogs barking, fiddles playing. The ship rests upon greased timbers, ropes taut to hold it. At signal, wedges are struck, ropes cut, and the hull begins to move. Slowly at first, then with sudden swiftness it slides down into water. Cheers erupt as it splashes, waves rising, gulls startled into air. For a moment the ship wobbles, uncertain, then steadies, rocking upon tide. It is born. Shipwrights stand aside, tired yet proud, their arms smeared with tar, their eyes shining. They know the ship will soon leave them, carrying strangers across waters they themselves may never sail. But their craft sails with it, their axe strokes, their fitted seams, their hammered nails. Every creak of plank is their voice, every roll of wave against hull is their labour remembered. They return to yard, to begin again, for ships are always needed, and the sea always hungers. Thus the shipwright's work is more than craft, it is a dialogue with sea itself. Each ship is a bargain, wood against wave, tar against tide, prayer against peril. Some ships will return, weathered but whole. Some will vanish beneath storm, their timbers drifting back to shore. Yet the shipwright builds again, for to stop would be to starve. His hands shape not only vessels but the very fate of villages, towns, kingdoms. Without him, the sea would remain barrier. Through him, it becomes road. Below the decks, order is a kind of salvation. Ballast stones lie in their bed like a second, secret cargo, keeping the ship honest in a cross sea. Barrels are chocked with wedges, corded with rope, and cribbed with dunnage so they will not take the notion to roll. Scribes chalk symbols on heads, wool, wine, oil, salt, so a man in the dark belly can read with a lantern and a touch. The bilge breathes slow through limber holes, pumps stand ready with leather valves oiled, for water is an uninvited passenger and must be shown the way out. On the rail stand castles fore and aft, wooden towers like clenched fists. They are meant to keep archers high and boarders low. In quiet weather they serve as lookout perches. In trouble, they make the cog a pricklier beast than her round hull suggests. The great sternpost rudder, iron-banded and stubborn as an ox, hangs from gudgeons and pintles. Under a steady hand it will talk the sea into better manners, yaw by yaw, until course is truth again. Rigging is a city of ropes with its own streets and laws. Shrouds ladder up to the mast where the lookout nests, eyes salted raw but keen, stays hold the spar against the sly pull of wind. Braces and sheets carry orders faster than any tongue. Hands learn the rig with feet as much as fingers. A step into a ratline here, a swing round a futtock there, the body making grammar out of hemp. Knots a catechist bowline clove reef, each a small decisive answer to a question the sea never stops asking. Loading day is theatre and mathematics together. A crane creaks, the hook bites, a barrel rises, turning slow as a sermon. Men with handspikes breathe in one accord to heel it true onto the tier. Heavy goods low, fragile goods high. Grain away from wet, oil from flame, iron where it will not quarrel with the compass. The purser keeps his roll and his temper. The cooper taps hoops with a mallet that speaks 3 languages, sound, secure, and split. Guild marks and leagues write their invisible names on every plank. In the cold north, merchants of many towns bind themselves by oath and tally their cogs sailing in company, their seals on each other's chests. Farther south, consulates keep ledgers in the ports, brokers bridge tongues, and factors wait like patient spiders in the counting houses, ready to bind wool to coin, coin to spice, spice to vow. A ship bears these webs as surely as she bears cargo. Signals govern the sea the way bells govern a town. A banner at the foremast means weigh anchor. A lantern in the rigging after dusk means steerage change. A trumpet's 3 notes call boats to water. When convoys form, the flagship's pennant is scripture. 1 haul for gather close, 2 for scatter, 3 for danger to larboard. In fog, the ship beats a drum at measured heartbeats, and the answer thuds back through wool and wood until each hull knows not only where it is, but who keeps it company. Customs follow saints as surely as shadows follow masts. Crews will not name certain animals aloud. They turn a coin when they first sight porpoise. They tuck sprigs of rosemary into coil and locker against rot of both rope and spirit. On the main deck a small image rides in a niche. Nicholas with his ships, Mary with her star wax, pooling at their feet from candles lit in gratitude or fear. Oaths are common as tar, prayers more common still. Maintenance is the price of tomorrow. In quiet roads a cog is careened, she is heeled until her flank bears like a whale, and men scrape barnacles and weed while others pay seams anew with oakum and hot pitch. Tallow is rubbed on where weed grows fiercest. Worms from warm waters are cursed and smoked with fires of damp wood. Sails are brought down and spread over cobbles for mending. Palms flash, needles bite, and reef points are renewed so a gale will find no weakness to pull. Voyage craft is half luck, half learned defiance. In a rising blow the master shortens canvas in steps, the square sail reefed to a smaller obedience, until only a storm trysail stares into rain like a narrowed eye. Heaving to makes a moving refuge, bow a little into the sea, drift with dignity, hold your nerve. When the wind drops into the hot breath of calm, the crew rig a boat astern and tow the parent like dutiful sons, or else they wait and curse kindly in equal measure. Danger has many faces besides storm. In bright weather a coral head will lift its knuckles a hand's breadth beneath green. In winter, flows nose along the Baltic like white rams. Shoal water gives fair warning if a man listens. Sea changes colour, the wave-top whispers different, so the mate casts the sounding line, tallow on its lead bringing up a secret. Sand, shell, mud, weed, each a syllable in the bottom's quiet speech. Not all fighting at sea is declared. Some captains hire extra archers for certain straits. Others paint false stripes on their hulls to look more warlike. Many sail in loose company, so an enemy must face. Not 1 deck but 6. Oil and pitch lie to hand in earthen pots, with plugs ready to pull. Sand sits in tubs to tread upon, when blood and rain make the planks traitorous. The ship's carpenter keeps an axe for boarding and an auger for emergency borne to make openings, one to stop them. The crew's society is a small, sharp world. Watchers turn the hours on a rope knotted with the sea's own numbers. The bell marks time enough for discipline, and not quite enough for sleep. A boy runs messages and learns to read sky. The cook coaxes miracles from a blackened pot. The boatswain's call carves silver lines through clamour. The pilot speaks seldom and is obeyed quick when he does. Quarrels are settled under the master's eye with punishments measured, not for pain, but for example, because one man's pride can founder a ship. Ports stamp their characters on timbers the way tides stamp weed on stones. Some harbours are bowls of stone with chains to bar. The mouth at night, some are rivers with bars that shift their teeth each season. Some are open roads where a fleet rides under a headland as snug as a cat under a chair. Tollmen count, reeves demand, brokers smile, and yet the quay is also a place of mercy. A rope thrown to a latecomer, a loaf handed to a stranger, a message left with a priest for the next ship bound east. Far cargoes change lives at home. A bale of alum lets dyers turn dull cloth to jewel. A chest of saffron colours an abbey's feast. A cask of pitch keeps a town's boats tight against winter. A roll of eastern silk becomes a banner that makes a market day feel like a coronation. Cogs and Carracks do not merely move goods, they ferry futures, each crate a small argument for a different tomorrow. Season rules ambition. In late autumn, ships crowd safe harbours nose to nose like cattle before a storm. In spring, they stamp and jostle at the bar for the first fair wind. Summer opens lanes that winter shuts with iron. Winter gives clean, strong winds where summer leaves a man praying for catspaws. Masters keep almanacs of memory. When the bay throws a chop against an easterly, when fog lifts like theatre curtains, when the current lies like a thief under the moon. Even wonder finds room aboard. In warm nights the wake burns with cold fire, and men laugh like boys at stars beneath their feet. Dolphins pace the bow. A whale breathes once, like a hill remembering to live. Flying fish stitch air to water. The lookout shouts land, sometimes a white cliff righteous as a sermon, sometimes a low dark line that smells of pine. And the ship leans that way as if she too were glad. When fortune runs out, the reckoning is quick and complete. A broken back on a hidden reef, a fire in the hold, a rogue sea lifting from the black. These end arguments. Then the sea keeps what it chooses. A bell tongueless on the bottom, a saint's image buried in silt, a handful of ballast stones carried home in pockets by those who swam farther than they feared. Shrines on land gain new votive ships, carved by hands that shake, painted with waves too large to be believed and too true to be denied. But most voyages end in the ordinary miracle. A bar straightened, a pilot boarded, a sail brailed dad, an anchor let go with a run that thunders like applause. Lines fly, curses soften into greetings, the gangplank clatters, the smell of bread from shore strikes like music. The ship settles against the tide and sleeps her first easy sleep in weeks, while men tumble ashore with legs that remember the sea, pockets that remember necessity, and tongues that will not keep silence until every tale has found a listener. So the cog, squat and stubborn, and the carrack, tall and hungry for horizons, keep the breath of kingdoms moving. They are not beautiful to everyone, but to those who have leaned a shoulder into a brace in rain, or felt a good helm answer like a friend, or watched a dark line of distant coast grow pale with promise. They are the very shape of courage. Timber against water, will against weather, faith against chance. In their slow, laden passage the world grows larger, one creek, one wake, one landfall at a tithe. Time is kept in sand and bells. A glass is turned by the imekeeper's hand, the pale stream falling with a hush that even the wind respects. When the last grain hides, he strikes the bell, and the watch changes like a tide. Men unlatch and men take hold. No clock is needed. The sea and the sand agree on the hour, and the ship obeys. Rations are counted with care. The purser tastes from each cask, knocks each barrel, weighs each sack of biscuit as if weighing a week's luck. Fresh water is doled in careful measures. The first days it tastes of wood and river, later of the long voyage itself. A stingy man earns curses, a reckless one, fear. Either way, the crew knows how thin a margin lies between enough and not enough. The capstan, or windlass, is the ship's jaw. Around it the cable bites. Men lean and step, lean and step. Voices braided into a chant so the strain becomes one muscle. The anchor comes grudgingly from the dark, weed-draped, mud-dripping, heavy with the riverbed's reluctance. When it breaks water, a cheer goes up that sounds like hunger delayed. Tools hang where hands can find them, blind. Marline spikes shine with use, serving mallets darken with tar, palms of leather save fingers from needles hungry as fish. Splices are small promises, long, short, aye, each meant to hold when the sky argues. A well-served line looks like a sermon, tight, plain, and meant to last. Animals share the voyage. A cat patrols the shadows with priestly seriousness, earning its keep in sudden squeaks and silent trophies. Hens complain in wicker coops and repay kindness in eggs. A pig rides aft until feast or storm decree its fate. Gulls bargain for scraps. Porpoises rise laughing under the bow, and once in a long while St. Elmo sets blue candles upon the yard, and even the boldest man goes quiet. Clothing learns the sea's grammar. Wool stays warm when soaked. Canvas shrugs sparks, hoods turn rain, mitts save rope burns. Tar paints everything the same colour, hands, beards, hems, until the crew looks like it has been born of the very pitch that seals the seams. Pride is mending well, not dressing fine. Sickness walks the gangway without paying. Stomachs revolt at first swell, then learn or refuse to learn. Cuts fester unless washed with brine and watched with prayer. A barber surgeon keeps knives bright, leeches ready, lint clean as poverty allows. A poultice of onion and honey is set beneath a saint's token. No one minds which remedy proves the better physician. Quarrels flare quickest over food, water, and sleep. The master's voice is the lid on the pot. He lifts it only to let steam out, never to feed a fire. Theft of a ration is a kind of treason. A thief finds rope against his back or irons against his ankle, and no man pleads for him. The ship is a narrow law, but it keeps men alive. Language aboard is a market of tongues. Breton curses, Flemish jokes, Genoese bargains, Latin prayers. Each useful, none sufficient alone. A gesture does half the work, a finger slicing the air for reef, a palm pushing for ease, a fist for hold. By the second week, even strangers pull as if they were cousins. Night watch has its favours. The sky becomes a book the learned cannot read and the ignorant cannot miss. The North Star stands steady as a promise. The Pleiades scatter like spilled salt. Orion walks the length of the world with a hunter's patience. Phosphorescence writes bright letters along the wake, and a man who thought himself coarse will speak softly. Repairs at sea are a sacrament of steadiness. A torn leech is brought down and bitten back together by needle and palm. A sprung plank gets oakum and pitch, while men lie belly down with the sea licking at their boots. A broken yard is scarfed with a sister piece and bound tight with hope and whipping. Each fix is a little bridge thrown over disaster. Weather breeds a dozen trades. In fair winds the sailor is a tailor, a cook, a cobbler, a storyteller. In a gale he is a knot, a claw, a prayer. Between, he is a cleaner of decks and a mender of tempers, scraping salt from wood and pride from words until both shine plain again. Pay is counted in months and in miles. Some take coin on the nail at signing, some a promise on parchment, some a share of what cargo may earn if fortune smiles. Shore leaves coin in taverns, in pews, in a mother's hand, in a ring, in a foolish purse. Then the sea calls it all back and demands more. No one sails to grow rich alone. A man sails to keep bread on a dozen tables. Pilots are men set apart. They speak to coasts like shepherds to flocks, naming each shoal and splice of tide under their breath. When a pilot comes aboard, even the master shifts half a pace and listens. In fog he reads the swell with his feet. In darkness he finds the river's mouth by the way wind smells of willow and dung. The galley fire is a tamed danger. Stones cradle the hearth, chains hold the pot. A watchful eye and wet cloth keep accident from learning mischief. When stew is ladled, complaints quiet. When bread appears, men remember that life is good enough to endure. A pot that never quite empties is the sign of a ship well governed. Women's voices are rare aboard, but they ride the wind in letters and souvenirs. A ribbon knotted round a knife hilt, a scrap of cloth sewn inside a cap, a prayer written on a fold of paper and hidden in a seam. These travel farther than courage on rough days. A man may show none of it, he nevertheless sails with it. Port talk drifts even at sea. A new tax in Bruges, a pest in Lisbon, a rich cargo rumoured in London, news flows faster than current and steers hope sharper than a helm. The purser's ledger bites its pen at such tidings. The master pretends not to hear, and trims a small sail of ambition just the same. In calms the ship listens to herself. Timbers tick, rigging hums, blocks cough. Men whisper so as not to break the spell. A bone flute finds a tune. Dice click like rain that refuses to fall. Heat presses, tempers flatten, and the smallest breath of air wins a cheer. In storms the ship speaks in a different tongue. She groans and shudders, but if she is well made she answers every sea with a stubborn bow and a clean swing. The helmsman rides her like a strong-willed horse. The crew becomes a single hand with 100 fingers. No one is brave alone. Together they are merely sufficient. When death comes, it is met with ropes and words. A body is sewn into sailcloth with a stone at the feet. The last stitch passes through the nose for certainty. A psalm is said in a voice that does not break if it can help it. The sea receives without comment. The wake closes, work resumes. Mourning is private and takes place between tasks. Landfall remakes men. Eyes narrow from horizon widen at a lane's clutter. Noses, long used to tar and brine, stagger at spice and dung and bread at once. Feet forget, streets wobble less than decks. Coin remembers how to leave a hand. After a night, most would sail again. After a week, almost all must. Tales are cargo too. A boy listens on his first voyage and speaks on his second. By his third he has acquired a storm he survived and a port he nearly married. Some stories are true and grow smaller with retelling, others are less true and grow better. All of them make the next hard job easier to lift. So the sailor's day knots itself to the next, glass turned, bell struck, rope hauled, meal swallowed, song begun, prayer ended. He learns the names of winds as other men learn saints, and honours both. His world is narrow and immense at once, width of a deck and the breadth of a horizon, and he walks it until land feels like a rumour and the sea like a vow kept. The sea may feed and carry, but it is never gentle for long. Every soul who lives within earshot of surf learns it early. Calm is a loan, not a gift. The same water that bears a boat like a cradle would turn and break it like a twig. Before charts were many and warnings sure, the lesson was written in wind and in the sudden, iron taste of air. The first sign is often small. A grey thumb smudges the western rim, the swell shortens, the gulls quit their lazy arcs and knife inland, scolding. Old sailors narrow their eyes and test the breeze on the tongue. A smell comes with it, raw, metallic, threaded with weed breath a storm takes before it speaks. Canvas tells the truth sooner than men. The square shrills, the leeches quiver, the luff mutters, like a dog not yet ready to bite. Orders crack, reef, brail, make snug. Men climb and vanish into rigging like beads on a string, hands black with tar, feet finding ratlines by memory. The sail is gathered to smaller courage, rope sings through blocks, knots land under palms that have tied them 1,000 times. Wind arrives with manners first, then with grievance. It slaps cheeks, leans at shoulders, takes a longer breath, and then shouts. Waves that were sheep become rams white-headed, butting in ranks. The hull begins its old conversation with the sea. I will rise if you permit it. I will fall if you insist. Everything aboard answers to that talk. Barrels nudge and bridle, ladles knock. A prayer candle flickers and thinks better of itself. Rain draws its curtain. The horizon folds in, blue turned to pewter, then to iron. Sight shortens to a deck's length. The helmsman squints into nothing and steers by feel heave underfoot, the pull on the tiller, the sound in the rigging. All of it a language learned by years. A man shouts to another at arm's reach, and is answered by wind. Lightning writes its crooked gospel across low cloud. Thunder stands up on the deck and shakes loose dust that has not existed since yesterday. Some cross themselves. Some spit over the lee as if bargaining. Some grin fiercely because it is better than the other choice. St. Elmo's blue tapers step onto the yard and cling there like obedient stars. Seas heap, tall at first, and sullen and close. Then the set meets a shoal or a contrary run, and shouldered hills wake into mountains. The bow climbs a black wall, and hangs one breath too long. The stern points where crows fly. The deck tilts, and every man is a crab. Then the fall down a wet stair with no steps. Smack at the bottom, the groan through timbers, the green water that comes aboard uninvited and leaves like a thief, hauling what it to grasp. Lines part with rifle sounds. A mast complains in a tone that sends blood cold. It is the voice of a tree, remembering how it broke once and may again. The cook lashes his hearth and prays not for saints, but for the sense to keep coals where they belong. The purser's casks creak a litany of losses to come. He curses them as if coin could frighten sea. Small boats take it hardest. A coracle that yesterday was a toy becomes a question with no good answer. A hooker inshore sees surf steepen over bar, and seeks the gut between breakers by colour alone, a paler green where sand sits, a darker cut where water runs. Wives stand on dune or quay, with shawls tight, mouths moving, hands colder than wind. Groundswell turns to surf with a soldier's discipline, line after line. On shingle each comber lifts the boat a hand's breadth, and drops it a hand's pane fartherette, ribs grinding. Men, thigh deep, take timing from the sea itself. Now, heave, now, hold, now, let the beast pass. One mistake, and the boat swings broadside, the next wave rolls it, and the day changes its name. Offshore, a cog lays to it. The main is scandalized. A storm canvas goes up, half a handkerchief, all of a will. She meets the sea square as faith, bows backs, bows again. The helmsman's jaw knots. The pilot mutters the prayer that has a different saint in every port, and the same fervour in all. Sometimes prudence means sacrifice. Cargo goes over, first jars of water, then wood that can be spared, then barrels dearer than breath. Wheat spills like dry rain, wine dyes the wake royal, wool floats a moment like drowned sheep and is gone. Men watch coin vanish and feel no sorrow, only time bought. A reef finds a ship by feel. The chart said a mile, the lead said 3 fathoms. The truth says, hush. A shudder, like a bell struck underfoot, the crunch like bones in frost, the bow pinned to a rock that never learned pity. She pounds there, each wave the hammer, the hull the nail. The order comes that no man wants to give and every man hears, axes to the mast. Better a living crew than a proud silhouette. Wood falls with a cry older than human voices. Some wrecks happen under moons clear as coin. A current shifts in the night like a thief moving a fence. Fog rolls in soft as wool and hard as iron. The offing moves 1 mile closer, while everyone's eyes insist nothing has changed. The first knowledge is the boom of surf where none should be. The second is too late. Coasts keep their own gallows tales. At the Devil's Tooth the sea jacks upward, even on a calm, a standing wave that waits for keels. At Widow's Reach a crosswind lives that has never been seen, but has thrown men into hard water for a century. Pilots teach these with a finger on a boy's breastbone. Remember here, and never here. Bandits wear sails as well as cloaks. A low, lean galley hides behind a headland like a cat behind a churn. She chooses a fat merchant, strikes her oars into water all at once, and comes on with a grin of bronze. Hooks fly, ropes bite. The gap narrows to a man's jump, and then there is the close work. Boards slick, breaths hot, knives honest. The sea watches and does his care. She will carry either flag home. Disease travels quieter than pirates. A cough that was nothing yesterday is a fever today and a spare hammock tomorrow. In crowded hold or tight forecastle, breath is a road. The barber surgeon bleeds and burns and prays and sometimes wins. Ports bolt their gates at the whisper of pest. Ships fly yellow. Goods rot in quarantine under a sky that looks forgiven. Fire is the enemy none can outrun. Pitch, rope, dry oak, everything that makes a ship is also tinder. A spilled ember, a kicked lamp, a spark where iron kissed iron, a tongue of flame finds a feast. Buckets run in chain, cloths soak, men slap and smother and hardly breathe for smoke. When the blaze climbs the shrouds and becomes a tree, choices close like a fist. Some jump and pray to learn swimming quickly, some hack a break in the deck and starve the fire, some kneel, because kneeling is the last best seam to cork between panic and sense. Winter writes shipwreck in a different hand. Ice rims the cordage, turns deck to glass, adds pounds to every line until masts bow under crystal. Breath plumes, beards freeze, hands fail at knots that were easy in May. The sea itself skims over in rills, then pains. The hull crunches forward with a carpenter's patience, shaving a path. A gale on such a day is as a storm. It is a judgment. Even the great harbours have their perils. Storm surges pile water against quays until bollards groan and chains sing like harps. Moorings part, ships fetch jut against one another with the sound of churches falling. Men on the piers haul lines and swear vows and forget both later, which is human. Ashore, the sea throws back what it does it want. Planks in teeth of weed, a mast like a gallows, barrels full of nothing that matters, bodies the tide lays down with ceremony and lifts again without it. Women who have watched all night walk the strand after dawn with faces the colour of the sky. Children learn the new quiet. Bells speak for those who cannot. Faith stands nearest on such days. Churches drip with salt candles, little ships carved of wax list under soot. St. Nicholas grows a wreath of coins. The Virgin's blue darkens with tears and smoke. A votive board is painted, a small hull in a painted black sea, a golden hand from cloud, a rope thrown and caught. The painter knows how to draw fear and mercy both. Superstition climbs the rigging with the men. No whistling, lest you call a wind you cannot pay. No cat thrown overboard, lest luck follow. No naming of the worst possibilities, lest you invoke them. When the sky goes the colour of old bruises, a relic comes out of a captain's chest, and men touch it as if it were a familiar threshold. Preparation is a kind of courage. Sheets are led fair, halyards coiled for a quick hand, sea anchors ready, pumps primed, axes set where they can be found in blind panic. A crew practised in small troubles fears great ones less. Their hands move before mouths to shape terror into words. Sometimes deliverance comes in unshowy ways. A shift of wind by a quarter, a vein of slack water by a headland, a patch of brighter cloud that turns out to be the first tear in the sky's hard face. A pilot smells mud where the river meets the sea and finds the channel by nose. A fisherman, seeing strangers flounder at the bar, rows out into teeth-white surf because someone once rowed for him. Survivors talk as if storms had voices. This one argued, that one screamed. A third repeated itself like a drunk old man. Men give them names unfit for church, and remember them by the scars they left in wood and in sleep. After the worst, laughter comes back slowly, and then too loud, which is how grief loosens. The sea keeps no ledger of debts paid or favours owed, only a tide book written in moonlight. Yet those who live by it learn a balance. Work well, praise quickly, store against lean days, mend what can be mended, accept what cannot. They launch again because hunger is patient, because trade is stubborn, because vows ask to be kept, and because there are mornings when the whole horizon looks like pardon. So storms and peril do not end the story. They write their rough chapters, and men and women answer with rope and wit and prayer. A ship that has seen hard weather moves in fair like a veteran among raw recruits, steadier, quieter, grateful. The sea does not remember, but sailors do, and their memory is the harbour where courage makes its home. A ship is only as brave as the hands that steer it, and those hands are only as sure as the way they find. In a world without printed charts for every bay, without signal lights to warn of shoal or reef, the medieval sailor learns to read a book written in wind and water and sky. Navigation is a science kept on shelves. It is a craft braided from memory, keen eyes, and a few stubborn tools that work in darkness as well as day. Along familiar coasts the old way rules. Pilots' men married to a stretch of shore know every headland and hollow, each reef that sleeps at low tide and wakes mean at flood. They speak the coast in names that taste of fear and respect. Dragon's Tooth, Widow's Reach, St. Anne's Spit. A tower half see-through haze marks a safe channel. A stand of pines shaped like a crown confirms a hidden bend. The pilot's finger traces air as if drawing a chart no one else can see, and the helmsman obeys. Depth is questioned with a simple line, a coil of rope, a lump of lead, a smear of tallow pressed into its base, lowered, lifted, red. Sand clings soft as bread, shell scratches, blue clay sticks cold and clean. Each feel speaks a sentence. Anchor here. Keep off. Channel close. Mind the curl. Men call out fathoms in a steady chant, and the deck answers with small shifts, obedient as a horse to heel and rein. But coasting keeps a sailor humble and the world small. Trade pushes outward, pilgrims hurry where no landmarks stand, and weather smothers sight. So men look up. The sky becomes a map no storm can drown. In the north the steadfast star holds its place, Polar a pin through heaven's cloth. Measure its height above the rim of sea, and you know how far north your soul has strayed. Watch it wheel slow in the night, and you learn tide and trust. Constellations lend their old company. The Great Bear points a rigid paw. Cassiopeia lounges like a crooked chair. Orion's belt lays a ruler across winter's dark. In the south and east, the Pleiades rise like a scatter of millet, promising season and wind. Lanterns are doused on clear nights, so eyes drink starlight. Men on watch lean against the rail and recite sky lore, the way monks recite psalms, half prayer, half practice, wholly necessary. Then comes the needle, quiet as a thought and twice as stubborn. At first it floats on a chip of wood in a cup, turning and turning until it points with a certainty that makes some cross themselves. Later it rests upon a card painted with winds, tramontane, levante, ponente, roses and lines blossoming from the centre, like a saint's vision captured on vellum. The compass does not care for cloud or fog, it answers iron and earth, an invisible pull that draws fear into order. Men mistrust it at first, as they mistrust any miracle that works for friend and sinner alike. Priests bless needles, captains hide them from crews made uneasy by a tool that points in darkness like an eye. But usefulness defeats suspicion. With a needle steady under glass or horn, a ship days a straight line across a bitter bay, days to cross fog that would have penned it to shore, days to heave from cape to cape without the kindness of landmarks. Other instruments join the chest. A mariner's astrolabe heavy brass holes cut so wind and pass comes aboard from scholars' hands and Arab halls. On a calm he holds it up, squints the sun or a star to the rim, and reads latitude in rings and numbers stamped by a careful smith. Cruder, kinder is the cross-staff, a wooden yard with a sliding cross. One end to eye, slide the cross until horizon kisses one edge and sun or star the other, then read the angle as easy as tallying cargo. Both tools bite the cheek with splinters, both lie when the deck heaves, both still give courage. Charts grow cleverer. Not maps of the whole world, no one owns such a thing, but portolans, faithful portraits of coasts, harbours pricked like constellations, wind lines splayed like a spider's patient web, capes painted with jewelled towers. Genoese and Venetian hands ink them on skin-smooth vellum, a fortune folded flat. Captains wrap them in waxed cloth and keep them from wet and from rivals' eyes. A good chart is as dear as a good wind. Yet paper and brass serve memory, they do not rule it. Pilots teach apprentices with sing-song lists, ports in order, bridges of tide, stones that never move and sands that always do. Secrets are kept like dowries. A family will keep a channel's quirk for generations. A guild will share to its sons and none other. A stranger asking the wrong question in the wrong tavern may drink alone. All the while the sea insists on its own say. Currents slide like snakes where rivers meet, salt, smelling of mud long before land is seen. A change in the skin of water, catspaws stippling a patch, a slick mirror beside it, whispers of wind to come or a tide's contrary will. The helmsman reads these as surely as letters, feeling them in the tiller, pressure lightening, then a sudden tug, the ship's head yawing if he lets his attention wander. Birds make marginal notes, kittiwakes argue above shoals, gannets spear a silver patch that marks a sandbank's edge. A single tired swallow far out means land, not impossibly far. In certain months flights angle with the season, and a captain as poor in Latin as any ditcher can still read that script. Smell writes a line too. Peat smoke when Ireland is near, pine when the Baltic breathes from the east, hot stone and rosemary when summer presses the Mediterranean shore. Fog is the hard teacher. Land vanishes, sound grows thick. Each wave arrives unheralded. Then men lean on the lead line and on the slow arithmetic of patience. Heave, sound, call. Heave, sound, call. Sand at 5, mud at 4, shingle at 3, a bell somewhere hidden under wool, a horn somewhere else like a cow in sorrow. Voices become ropes thrown between ships, so they do not strike one another groping for the same invisible door. By day the sun keeps counsel with shadow. A noon mark cut into the rail tells latitude crudely, day by day. The angle a rope throws on the deck goes into a pilot's head to sit beside yesterday's angles. By night the hourglass rules. Sand hisses from bulb to bulb. A boy turns it and sings the watch, and the ship's heart beats to that rhythm. Set a course, hold a course, change the watch, praise the Lord. Superstition accumulates like salt. Some will not sail on a feast day that went ill 2 years running, some tie 3 knots in a cord to bind 3 fair breezes, loosing one when calm stifles, one when contrariness nags, one when despair sharpens. No one whistles, for fear of calling what must not be named, yet the most pious will spit over the lee to bribe whatever listens. Every master learns how far to trust his tools, and how far to trust the quiet inside his ribs. The compass points north, but iron in the hull sulks and pulls it wrong. The astrolabe speaks in degrees, but a rolling deck lies. The chart shows a harbour mouth, but silt has moved its teeth since the ink dried. Then the pilot closes his eyes 1 heartbeat and counts the sea's breaths, tastes wind, listens not with ears but with the soles of his feet. He shifts 2 points and is right by instinct trained into bone. Imagine the open sea without a coastline's comfort. The world is blue and moving, and blue above it moves too. The ship sits on a living plane. Every edge is a lie until proven otherwise. The helmsman glances from needle to sun to a smear of cloud that may be storm or merely mood. A day of fog becomes 3. Men begin to dream of green casks sound lower each morning. Then, in dusk, a scent of loam, a sudden shoal of white moths that are really gulls, and a line on the horizon, so faint a man is ashamed to hope. Hope anyway. When landfall comes true, the pilot names each feature as if greeting cousins. That light chalk scarp is the back of St. Bride. That dark notch the devil's mouth. The water there runs fast even at neap, so keep away. The ship slides into knowledge again like a hand into a well-known glove. Men laugh too loud. The cook promises a stew with more than biscuit in it. The captain thanks a saint and the needle both. By the late Middle Ages, these arts bind coasts to coasts like stitched cloth. English wool finds Flemish looms by lines no eye can see. Venetian galleys angle from Crete to Alexandria by compass and sun. Basque hulls learn a straight taste of Biscay that once would have cowed them to capes. No single voyage is triumph, each is a page added to a long patient ledger of knowing. On every ship that dares distance you will find the same modest treasury, a battered compass whose card flutters when a man's breath is rough, a sounding line crusted with old tallow and newer sand, a portolan creased and stained, edges salted white, a cross-staff nicked by teeth and prayer both. Around them move men who make of guess and grace a path through trackless places. And when night lifts clear and cold after days of blind running, a sailor on the foredeck leans back until the mast is a black finger on the Milky Way. He names the stars like friends, and feels the ship sliding under them, not lost, but chosen. In that moment the sea is still a peril, but it is also a book he can read, and the margin is wide enough to write home upon. Not every voyage sets out to find profit or fish. Some set out to find mercy. For many, the road to grace runs over water, and ships become moving chapels crowded with hope. Men and women leave hearths and fields to cross to shrines whose names ripple through prayer, Compostela, Canterbury, Rome, Jerusalem, trusting timber, tide, and the kindness of saints. Vows and reasons. A vow begins small, a fever breaks and a whisper is made to St. James. A child lives, and a mother promises a journey to Our Lady. A soldier fears his sins outweigh his sword work, and seeks pardon on a distant road. Debt of gratitude and debt of conscience weigh the same. The parish priest names indulgences. A neighbour tells of a relic that healed a crooked hand. Thus the decision hardens like wax cooling in a mould. Go. Tokens and signs. Pilgrims mark themselves so the world will know their errand. Scallop shells for Santiago, ampullae stamped with Our Lady for Walsingham, a cross sewn in thread the colour of wine for Rome. Hats are brimmed wide against weather, staffs shod with iron ring on stone and deck. Pouches carry coin if coin can be spared, and scraps of food if it cannot. Around some necks hang letters of safe conduct. Around others little bags of dirt from home to kiss when fear grows bold. Setting out for the sea. The road narrows at the port. Taverns mutter with news. Which hulls hold steady in a cross sea, which captains pray and which drink, which routes are barred by war or rumour of pirates. Pilgrims cluster like starlings, sorting themselves by destination and purse. Some rent a place on a merchant ship bound part way. Some wait for a dedicated passage boat, advertised by a clerk with a board and a bell. At the chapel by the quay, candles already show their golden backs to the water. Farewell and blessing. Before boarding there is ritual. A bell is rung, a psalm is said, a priest lifts his hands and salts the decks with holy water. Names are spoken at the rail, debts forgiven as best as they can be, embraces done twice for luck. The ship receives them as a church receives parishioners at Easter. Crowded, earnest, heavy with intention. Lines are cast off, the land shrugs its comfort away. The voyage begins with the taste of salt and a prayer that is half-breath. Aboard with the devout pilgrims sleep where space permits, beneath an awning of patched canvas, atop coils of line, beside barrels that sweat brine. They share benches with sacks of wool and the hooves of tethered goats. Seasickness chooses its victims democratically. Nobles and labourers lean together over the same rail and find humility in retching. Food is as at the sailor's mess, but plainer. Hard bread softened in ale or broth. A dried onion shared between three, the rare gift of fresh fish. Grace is said before each mouthful, and gratitude follows even poor fare when the sea is kind. Prayers at sea morning and evening. When labour loosens, the ship's company gathers near the mainmast. If a chaplain travels, he opens a small missal, and the deck becomes a nave. If none, someone of steady voice intones a psalm while others answer. Hymns are low so the wind will not carry swelled pride to heaven. A small lantern shelters a candle before an image nailed to the mast. Nicholas with rescuing hands, Mary crowned with stars, James with his staff and shell. Pilgrims finger their rosaries when waves rise, whispering decades as if paying out line to haul themselves toward calm. Mixed company ranks matter less where space is none. A cloth merchant's wife holds a cup to the lips of a mason who helped buttress her town's choir. A knight tells stories to a child whose father mends his chausses with sailor's thread. Languages braid into one rope, French with Gascon, English with Flemish, Latin words dropped in like knots. Arguments spark over a corner of tarpaulin, over the order at the mess, over whether dice are decent on a holy errand, but the sea whittles rancour small. Tomorrow's weather demands better from everyone. Perils and temptations. Devotion does not smooth the waves. Storms find pilgrims as quickly as they find merchants, and fear makes even the pious clutch at the nearest hand. Pirates smell profit in piety. Crews nail lids tighter and sharpen what must be sharp. Sickness walks the crowded deck. Aggo cough, a rash that spreads quicker than patience. Quacks sell herbs. True healers hoard vinegar and clean cloth. Temptations cross the gangplank as easily as prayer. A game in the lee of a hatch. A cup too many, a glance held too long. Confession finds ready ears and quieter hearts. Harbours on the way. Few can afford a direct passage from home to shrine. Most voyages hop like birds along a hedge. The names become a litany. From Sandwich to Harfleur, from La Rochelle to Corunna, from Marseille to Messina to Jaffa. At each port, pilgrims taste another world, spiced stews sold by boys with brass ladles, markets where coral and silk hang like seasons, mosques and synagogues and churches sharing a horizon. Some barter for charms, a scrap of veil, a vial of oil, a pebble someone swears was near a saint's foot. Skeptics laugh, believers tuck them deeper. Guides and contracts beyond the familiar sea. A guide is as necessary as bread. In Mediterranean harbours, officials in long robes write names and fees into careful books. In the north, a guild brother vouches for who may board a ship for St. James. Contracts are witnessed, seals kissed, tithes promised. Some ships demand silence at night, some forbid dice, some insist on a fast every Friday whether the sea rages or rests. The wise sign and obey. The stubborn learn the hard way that discipline keeps a floating parish from becoming a pen. Approach to Holy Port's landfall near a shrine is different from any other. Songs begin unbidden when a tower or scallop-marked arch shows itself through mist. For Compostela, the coastline smells of firs and smoke, and pilgrims talk of the long road that will begin where the sea river ends. For Rome, ships crowd the Tiber and the city's bells stir the water. For Jerusalem, the anchorage at Jaffa is a prayer by itself, for the landing is treacherous, and the road inland stalked by heathen men with honest need and others with knives. Tears come either way of relief, of fear spent, of vow nearly fulfilled. Arrival and alms officials count heads, note deaths and births if any came to term between capstan and keel. Pilgrims kiss ground, yes, even the proud, then wash in basins set out by religious houses that know the traffic of souls. A pilgrim hospital receives the sick, a hostel receives the weary, a priest receives the confessions. Ice has kept cold for weeks. Alms are given according to purse and conscience, copper for the poor, silver for candles, a wax ship set on a side altar to tell in miniature what God already knows. At the shrine. The air in a great shrine has its own weather, incense like a warm cloud, beeswax like sunlight poured. Relics gleam in glass and gold, bone chips, a fragment of cloak, a thorn, a stone kissed smooth by centuries. The queue shuffles with a patience unknown in markets, no one bargains with grace. A hand is laid to a reliquary, a prayer is breathed as if through a keyhole. A burden lifts or does das, but either way a vow is paid. Some leave tokens behind, a crutch, a lock of hair, a ring once pledged in haste and now redeemed in humility. Commerce of piety shrines share a wall with shops. Pilgrim badges are cast by the hundred in pewter and lead, stamped with scallops or keys or crowns. Scribes sell letters to carry home, neatly folded and sealed with saints impressed in wax. Innkeepers sell beds the width of a narrow thought. Not all is greed. Charity brews in great kettles, ladled to the poorest. Minstrels earn coin with tales of miracles credible and not. Ushers earn patience keeping order when the crowd swells like a spring tide. The work of gratitude. Some pilgrims serve before they depart, scrub floors in a hostel, carry water to the sick, light candles others cannot afford. Others put vow into timber or stone, a beam bought for a roof, a course of ashlar paid for in thanks, a lamp pledged to burn on the eve of a feast. A few, called to linger, bind themselves to the place for a season, guides, sweepers, singers of psalms, so that other travellers may find what they came to find. Turning for homeward is lighter, but not easy. The sea has not promised to spare those satisfied with grace. Yet hearts beat steadier, fear has spent much of its coin, and hope carries a balance in hand. Pilgrims share what they saw, the face of a priest who forgave as if pouring water, the cloth over a relic that shimmered like heat, the way bells sound in a city where every tower seems to call a different name of God. They speak of dangers without boasting, of kindness without shame. Shipboard with stories. On the return voyage, songs outnumber groans when the sea allows. Someone who learned a hymn in a strange tongue teaches it, and the deck becomes a bridge between two coasts. Dice rattle, yes, but so do rosaries. A boy whittles a scallop into the head of his staff. A woman stitches a pilgrim badge to a sleeve, with thread dyed a foolish blue she bought in a market and loves. Even the sailors listen when a miracle is told well. Loss and memory. Not all who go come back. A name is carried ashore by others and spoken in kitchens and chancels with the gentle respect given to the brave and the obedient. A pewter badge is hung in a poor house beside a sprig of dried rosemary. A child is lifted to see the votive ship his father promised. It swings slowly in the draught above the nave as if still at sea. What the journey leaves. Those who do return bring more than tokens. They bring a wider map, held not in the hand, but in the head, where the water turns green over a certain shoal, which inn keeps faith with travellers, which alley holds thieves and which a saint's well, how far the stars appear from different shores. Their speech is salted with new words. Their prayers are salted with new patience. They are rarely richer in coin, often poorer, and content with both truths. The sea's part in salvation water bears wheat and wool, yes, but also vows and tears. It straps cities to shrines and strangers to one another. It is the road a promise walks, the test a fear must pass, the mirror in which a soul sees how small it is and how held. Pilgrims make this plain that a ship could be an altar, and a harbour a kind of heaven's porch. And when at last the pilgrim stands again at the home hearth, shell on hat, staff scuffed shiny, eyes older and kinder, house seems smaller and dearer, the bread sweeter, the parish bell deeper. Stories are told and retold, changed a little each winter like a path beaten truer by steps. The sea returns to its old work beyond the fields, but its sound now carries two notes in the listener's chest, the old fear, and beside it, the new trust. Not every sail is raised for markets or mercy. Sometimes canvas climbs the masts for command. When kings quarrel or coasts are harried, when pirates grow bold or a crusade is cried, the sea gathers teeth. Harbours turn loud, shipwrights work by torch, and merchant hulls become hard-handed with war. A fleet is cooled, and a town learns how much iron a tide could carry. The call spreads by horn and parchment. Heralds shout in squares. Guildmasters meet behind shut doors. Reeves nail notices to wharf posts that already bristle with bills for salt and wool. Lords send writs demanding ships in lieu of horse. Abbeys promise barrels of bread and ale. Fishermen grumble as their stout river boats are counted and chalked for service. Rumour runs faster than any clerk. An enemy fleet seen at the headland, a pirate nest smoking, a banner lifted in the name of God and King. Shipyards answer first. Cogs are stripped to their bones and dressed anew. Cargo cleared, decks trussed with railings, bulwarks raised, planking doubled where arrows love to bite. Platforms bloom like wooden crowns at bow and stern, good perches for archers and men with crossbows. On leaner hulls a catapult is rigged, or a great windlass readied for heavy bolts. Tar hisses, pitch bubbles, hammers beat the shipwright's psalm. What yesterday bore fish and wool, today learns the weight of mail and quarrel. Blacksmiths work red to white and back again. They forge heads for arrows and jagged hooks for boarding. They draw out long spikes to pin grapnels, strap shields with iron, mend helms, rivet rings in hauberks whose owners swear they still fit. Sparks jump like small stars and die in sawdust. Boys run with water and coal. Men swear by saints whom they also love. The harbour smells of iron and hot fat, of oak smoke and old rope, of money burning its fingers. Soldiers arrive uncertainly, their feet mistrusting planks. Knights in mail with horses left inland, men-at-arms with bills and axes, archers stiff with sheaves of ash and goose feather. They eye the water as if it were a clever enemy already. Sailors eye them back and smirk without meanness. Each knows a language the other must learn by noon. Names are taken, billets assigned, sea chests shoved into corners that will belong to no one by morning. There is blessing before blood. Priests climb gangways, aspergilla dripping. Relics are raised and kissed. Nicholas and Mary are named as if they were captains themselves. Candles gutter in a wind that knows nothing of indulgences. Some ships hammer a coin beneath the mast. Some tie a sprig of green at prow. Some swear to give a portion of prize to a shrine if they come home. The bell at the pier tolls as if measuring courage by strokes. The fleet takes order as a shepherd orders sheep in a narrow pass. A flagship leads, its banners speaking a grammar of colour and shape. Other ships answer with flags and lanterns, night turning every signal to a brief alphabet of flame. Scouts run wide, oars flashing like fish bellies. Deep-bellied cogs hold the centre, heavy with men and bread and arrows. Supply boats keep inside the guard, slow and resigned, like oxus in a soldier's line. Life aboard grows tighter than any market day. Where bales once sat, men squat back to back, knees discovering strangers. Rations taste of salt and duty, hard bread, potted meat, onions, a ladle of ale. A barber finds a corner for his basin, a chaplain finds a board for his missal. A cooper sleeps curled in his largest cask and calls it virtue. Seasickness strikes the proud and leaves them humbler. A joke makes a crew into a company more quickly than a sermon, but both have work. Discipline hardens like frost. A rope's end corrects a slow hand in the shrouds. A captain's eye weighs silence like bread. Watch is constant. Blades are kept from rust. Bows are unstrung until the order is given and then strung, as if the string were a nerve. Quarrels are settled fast, or the bilge will nurse them into monsters. A fleet is a town with no alleys and no fields to walk angrily across. Men learn to forgive or to forget. When battle comes, it rises out of a morning as ordinary as any other. A dark line at the horizon thickens, someone runs the length of the deck shouting the enemy's name. Drum and trumpet wake the blood. Sails are shortened to make room for work. Anchors made ready to drop like iron prayers. Buckets are filled for fire that has not yet started but soon will. Each man finds his post, the way a hand finds a scar. Arrows begin the talk. Sky darkens in spots, then ripples as fletching hums. Crossbows thump, slow and deadly. The big engines cough stones and pots of pitch that fly with a sound like torn cloth. Shields lift, boards splinter. The air fills with feathers and smoke and the pepper bite of burning tar. Men shout to steady their throats. The sea takes what falls and keeps it. Then hooks fly. Grapnels bite rail and rigging, ropes go taut, hulls kiss and grind, ladders bang and catch. The ship becomes a street where there are no doors to slam and no corners to run around. Axes work at lines, knives work at men, poles shove and pikes bite. An archer drops his bow and draws a dagger because the distance has changed its mind. A sailor cuts the enemy's halyard and shouts as if he had slain a dragon. Noise drowns prayer, then becomes prayer by excess. Fire is coward and king both. A jar of pitch breaks, and the blaze walks uphill as if it had business there. Sails go from wind-white to devil orange in a breath. Tar boils, men throw wet cloth and words at once. Some fleets keep fire ships, a hull loaded with tinder and ill will, set alight and loosed to drift down upon a knot of the enemy. Wise captains fear their own weapon and give it room as if it were a saint with a temper. Water judges quickly. A wounded ship lists and shows her ribs. The crew heaves spare spars, screens a breach with any plank that remembers how to float. Pumps thud. Men bail with helmets and hats. Someone laughs because he has forgotten how not to. If the order comes to cut free, ropes are hacked and the two fighting decks drift apart, each astonished to still exist. Sometimes they do not. Victory is tidy. Captured ships are stripped of gear and glory. Prisoners are counted and tied. The dead are given to water with a psalm and a stare. Wounded men are laid where air could find them. Vinegar and linen do their best. Old enemies hold cups to new enemies' mouths without remark. Spoils are tallied by clerks whose hands shake slower than their hearts. A town will feast. A chapel will grow heavier with silver. A widow will learn a new address for her grief. Not all musters chase banners. Many hunt thieves. Pirates grow where law thins fast galleys with hard oars. Men who know every creek and sell mercy dear. Patrol fleets prowl headlands and straits. Days of empty water broken by one short, brutal sprint. When the pirate is taken, the gallows is built as publicly as a market stall, and a burned hull smokes like a sermon. Trade breathes again for a season. Between fights, the fleet is a floating school. Soldiers learn where not to stand when a boom swings. Sailors learn to keep their heads when horn and drum make land noise out of sea. A captain who listens to a pilot is a rich man. A pilot who listens to a captain keeps his teeth. Songs are forged that will travel farther than any ship. Verses about a lucky shot, a broken rudder mended with a saint's name, a cook who fought with a laddard and won the day in memory, if fought in fact. Wind and hunger fight the king's plans as boldly as any enemy. A contrary breeze holds a whole policy by the throat. A sprung mast rewrites a treaty. Bread moulds, water sours. Courage runs lean if storms sit on the horizon for a week and do nothing but thick. Then, suddenly, a breath from the right quarter, a bell, a pointing arm, and men remember why they came. Homecoming breaks the hardness. Sails go down, anchors thunder. Harbours fill with voices that have learned new edges. Banners are ragged and therefore beautiful. Children stare at patches of strange cloth on patched hulls, colours from ports they will learn to name in schoolboy boast. A procession climbs from quay to church, boots scuffing, helmets in hands, a vow paid in wax and coin for each ship that returns. Bells take up the story, and ring it until the town has heard itself be brave. Long after, the muster remains in small ways, a nicked blade above a mantle, a scrap of banner stitched into a christening cloth, a votive ship rocking in a side chapel's draught. Old sailors sit by the pier and tell it better than it was, and exactly as it was, in the same breath. The sea resumes its older work, fish and trade, pilgrim and tide, but it remembers how quickly men can turn it into a field, and how stubbornly they can turn back to bread once the field is reaped. Not every ship upon the medieval sea carries trade or pilgrims. Some are built for war, when kings call, when lords feud, when pirates must be hunted or coasts defended. Ships gather into fleets, a naval muster. These moments fill harbours with noise and awe, soldiers boarding, archers stringing bows, blacksmiths hammering weapons, sailors fitting ships not for cargo but for combat. It is a sight both thrilling and grim, for the sea that feeds and carries could also become battlefield. The call to muster comes in many ways. A royal herald rides to ports proclaiming the king's need for ships. Guildmasters meet, deciding which merchants will send vessels, which captains will serve. Lords send messages to vassals, demanding ships in lieu of knights. Even fishermen may be pressed, their small boats taken to scout or ferry troops. Bells ring from churches, town criers shout through markets, rumours swell faster than tide, pirates sighted, enemy fleet approaching, crusade declared. Shipyards surge with activity, cogs are refitted for war, decks cleared of cargo to make space for soldiers, sides reinforced, platforms built for archers, new galleys may be built, long, lean, driven by oars as well as sail, swift and deadly. Blacksmiths forge arrowheads, swords, axes, hooks for boarding. Coopers craft barrels for water and salted meat. Fletchers work day and night. Ropes are tarred, sails patched and strengthened. Harbour air grows harsh with smoke and hammering, the usual trade drowned by clamour of preparation. Quartermasters and pursers pace like chess players. They count biscuit by the thousand, salt beef by the barrel, water by the ton. Vinegar is loaded to sweeten casks gone stale, onions to fend off rot, wax to seal seams, spare spars to replace what battle will snap. Pitch stinks from boiling pots, resin beads on new ropes. Tally sticks notch upward. What a fleet eats in a week could empty a poor market. What it drinks would float a coracle. Soldiers arrive from inland. Knights in mail, their horses left behind, climb awkwardly aboard decks more used to wool than war. Archers come in companies, bows strung, quivers packed with sheaves of arrows. Men-at-arms carry poleaxes, bills and crossbows. Their faces show excitement and unease. Many have never been to sea. They pace docks uncertainly, gazing at waves with more fear than they'd show in any land battle. Sailors smirk quietly. They know the sea shows no favour to bravery untested. Captains gather crews, choosing the best hands for dangerous service. Steersmen who know tricky coasts, climbers swift in rigging, gunners wear great crossbows or springalds to be mounted. A pilot who can smell a shoal in fog is worth 2 bold knights. Some crews are pressed unwillingly, criminals offered pardon for service, drifters caught in taverns, poor men promised coin. Yet many go willingly for pay or patriotism or the lure of plunder, for defeated ships are rich prizes. Before departure, there are blessings and pageantry. Priests walk the decks, sprinkling holy water, raising relics high. Banners snap in wind, rural lions, town crests, saints' emblems. Drums beat, trumpets call, and harbours swell with people watching. Wives weep, children cling, merchants calculate risks. It is spectacle and dread, colour and song masking the knowledge that many may not return. Harbour defences answer with their own rights. Chains boom across narrow mouths are tested and raised aside. Beacons are stacked with brush for night alarm. Watchmen rehearse horn calls, long for stranger, 3 short for friend, a broken call for fire. The tide is consulted like a magistrate. Only when it consents do anchors lift and hulls lean outward, one after another, as if the town itself were exhaling. Once at sea, a war fleet moves like a strange floating town. Flagships lead, signalling with banners by day and lanterns by night. Galleys skim ahead as scouts, their oars flashing. Cogs follow heavy with troops. Order matters. Supply ships protected in centre, swift vessels at edges. Sailors shout, trumpets sound, drums beat to keep rowers pace. Life aboard grows even tighter, soldiers crammed where cargo once lay, sleeping shoulder to shoulder, weapons near hands. Food is hardtack and salt meat, water carefully rationed. Seasickness plagues land-borne troops, their groans mingling with creak of rigging. Discipline hardens, the watch is doubled. A man sleeps with his boots on and his knife within reach. Fires are caged in iron, their sparks counted like coins. The master-at-arms walks the deck at odd hours, listening for quarrels that might flare into danger in a place with nowhere to walk away. The purser keeps the key to the spirit cask as if it were a relic. Signals tie ships together when speech cannot. A pennant at the main means form close. A flag at the fore means scatter. A lantern, hoisted thrice and lowered twice, tells of shoal. The admiral's drum sets a beat that a rower can feel in bone, mean when wind steals the sound. On fog nights horns answer horns, low and long, so the fleet can hear itself exist. Strategy rides the wind. To gain the weather gauge, to keep the windward side, is to own choice. A fleet topwind may choose to close or hold. A fleet downwind must accept the other's mind. Captains study cloud and chop like letters. They watch bird flight, taste the air, and speak softly to pilots whose eyes have learned the grammar of grey water. Naval combat is fierce and brutal. Ships close in rather than fight at distance. Archers loose volleys first, their arrows darkening sky, hammering down upon decks. Crossbows fire heavy bolts that to pierce planks or armour. Stones hurl from engines, flaming pitchpots shatter in smoke and fire. Then comes grappling hooks thrown, ropes hauled, ships lashed side by side. Soldiers surge across, swords flashing, axes hacking rigging and masts, shields clashing. The sea becomes chaos, screaming, smoke, splintering wood and the crash of hulls. Hulls. Boarding is the true decision. Planks slam down, ladders bite. A ship becomes a narrow street with no door to slam and no alley to flee. Bills and axes do butcher's work, pikes lock like antlers. The cry of "cut the halyard" could unroof a foe faster than 100 brave men. Sand is thrown on bloody planks to grant footing. Tubs of water stand ready for pitch that leaps where it is invited. Fire is most dreaded. A single spark upon dry rope or sail can doom a ship. Pitchpots explode, decks blaze, men leap into sea rather than burn. Water buckets are passed frantically, but flames leap with wind. Many fleets keep fireships, vessels set ablaze and sent drifting toward enemy lines, a terror that scatters even the bravest crews. Wise captains cut them adrift early or turn them back with hooks and long poles, cursing and praying together. Between arrow and axe works the surgeon barber. He lays a plank for a table, heats iron, threads needles, boils wine. He saws clean what cannot be mended, binds what cad, and stuffs wounds with lint stripped from shirts blessed earlier that morning. He works with his mouth closed against the stink of pitch and fear, murmuring saints' names he does not otherwise remember to say. When fortune turns, it does so quickly. A mast goes by the board, a rudder jams, a captain falls, a rope fouls, a foot that should have taken one more step. A prize crew leaps aboard a taken cog and cuts her free. The victors cheer and then fall instantly silent to count their own. Defeat is silence too, but heavier. The sea keeps names impartially. Victory is savage. Captured ships are stripped of cargo and weapons, survivors taken for ransom or sold as slaves if fortune is cruel. Losers sink or burn, their dead claimed by waves. Ports celebrate when fleets return, but harbours also receive news of loss. Widows made, sons never home. Bells ring for both triumph and mourning. Law follows in the wake. Prize courts, some no more than a table in a guild hall, some solemn under vaulted stone, decide who owns what was taken. The crown's tenth, the admiral's share, the crew's portions, the merchant's complaint. Oaths are sworn over salt and steel. Quarrels born in smoke are ended in ink, though not always cleanly. Not all naval musters are war. Some chase pirates, who prey upon merchants with swift galleys and merciless speed. Towns band together to fund patrol ships. Kings send fleets to clear coasts. These voyages are long, dull hunts broken by sudden skirmish, swift and bloody. Pirate ships, once caught, are burned in harbours as warning. Their crews hung from piers, grim spectacle meant to keep trade safe. Blockades are wars of patience. A fleet sits across a harbour mouth like a gate set upon water. Lanterns pace the dark, boats whisper, signals climb and fall. Inside, prices rise and tempers shorten. Outside, bread grows mouldy and spirits thin. A single night wind may decide a season, slip in, slip out, or pin to starve. Between fights, craft demands its due. Sails are unbent and mended, seams are paid with oakum and hot pitch, hulls are fothered with greased cloth to stanch a weeping wound. Men scrape weed and barnacle from planks at low tide, cursing the sea's habit of giving food to what is his food. A fleet that neglects its small work will not live to meet the large. Fellowship forms despite iron. Sailors teach soldiers to duck a boom and read a squall line. Soldiers share how to hold a shield on a deck that will not keep still. Chaplains bless both, then carry buckets like any man when flame finds a rope. Songs are minted, verses about a cook who brained a corsair with a ladle, a pilot who threaded a night passage by the smell of peat smoke, an archer who shot the halyard and brought a saint to weep with laughter. Storms interrupt kings as boldly as enemies do. A contrary wind turns strategy to drift. Rain rots bowstrings. Cold claws through mail and skin alike. Days to vanish into grey sameness, no foe, oh wet and waiting. Then, as sudden as a bell, a clear rim opens in cloud. A breeze remembers its manners, and flags flower from masts as if a garden had decided to sail. Homecoming has its own ceremony. Banners tattered, hulls patched with timber of wrong colour from foreign quays, the fleet creeps in on a tide that knows all their names. Quayside crowds surge, boys count arrow holes, girls note scars and decide who has grown handsomer for them. Processions climb from quay to church, boots scuffing, helms bare, votive ships carried on poles, candles promised, long ago paid in wax and coin. The town hears itself brave and keeps the sound. Aftermath settles into objects. A nicked blade above a mantle, a scrap of ensign sewn into a child's christening cap, a rosary made from beads traded in some port where a man learned he would live. In chapels, painted tablets show ships in storm saved by holy hands. Beside them hang tablets that do not show men saved, only remembered. Markets return to wool and wine, but the talk will always widen when someone says, "in the muster." The naval muster reminds all that the sea is not only trade route or pilgrim's path, but battlefield. It shows how kingdoms project power, how ports defend themselves, how sailors and soldiers alike stake lives upon waves. Yet it also shows resilience, men and women turning wood and rope into weapons when needed, trusting to skill, courage, and faith against chaos. The sea remains untamed, but still they answer when called, ready to risk all for king, town, or kin. The sea is too vast, too unpredictable, too full of death and wonder to face with skill alone. Everyone at the water's edge knows this, even the ones pretending not to. Ropes and planks and clever hands will take you admirably far, right up to the place where a wave taller than your house asks whether you've brought anything else, at which point luck, fate, and the divine are invited aboard without checking references. Mariners live in a ticket of faith, prayers, charms, blessings, stories. None buoyant, all indispensable. A boy steps on a pier and is handed rules immediately. Never whistle. The wind is vain and comes when called, and not always politely. Don't sail on the feast that sank your uncle's boat. Calendars remember. Sunset tells truths in colour. Red for perhaps green for don't be clever, black for go home. Birds report the weather for free. Ducks low, trouble high, dolphins playing, keep the stew pot ready. One crow alone is an omen with no sense of humour. These rules are written, which makes them firmer. Charms multiply because fear does arithmetic. Crosses get carved into masts, so the wood will behave like a Christian. Seashells are stitched to sails in case cloth understands compliments. St. Nicholas hangs from necks in small lead versions. Heavier medal, heavier mercy, so runs the math. Rope knotted by a priest rides in a pocket, doing what rope does best, reassuring by its mere presence. Wives sew herbs into hems, rosemary to tether memory, rue to curdle misfortune. None of this floats, all of it steadies. Pilgrims sell the good stuff by the quay. There are tokens that once touched a saint, and tokens that once touched a token that once touched a saint. The prices are scaled by proximity to holiness and the vendor's children's appetites. Sailors buy anyway, counterfeit hope still burns. A man will carry 3 different Nicholas medals and claim it's for balance. The merchant weighs coin, the sailor weighs calm. Both go away satisfied, which counts as a miracle. Before a voyage, ritual moves through the harbour like a tide that knows every doorstep. Captains walk the deck touching the mast with a private inventory of sins and favours. Crews crowd chapels where wax ships float on seas of votive smoke. The air smells of tallow and bargaining. Nicholas, stretched thin across Europe, is petitioned with the calm confidence of men who know his workload and admire it. The Virgin, star of the sea, rides aboard in icons small enough to nail to a beam and large enough to be noticed by heaven. Local saints are drafted for regional duties and rarely complain. Mass is said if a priest can be found before he's found breakfast. Holy water freckles the planks, incense and tar attempt a truce. Psalms speak sternly to the ocean about who is in charge. The ocean listens with the patience of something eternal. Mothers and wives measure out tears in exact quantities. Too little is tempting fate. Too much is unfair to the men. Children cling and are told it will be soon, meaning not soon. Farewell is the art of letting go while holding on loudly. Afloat, faith stows itself wherever there's room. Some ships carry chaplains who can say mass in a sea that won't hold still, which counts double. Confessions are brisk when the horizon develops personality. On calmer watches, someone leads a hymn. Voices wander in and meet again, like small boats finding harbour. A candle burns before a mast, saint. Yes, fire near rope, thank you for noticing. Faith is primarily an engineering discipline. Even the weather occasionally participates. St. Elmo's fire stitches blue light along the spars. Sailors point and decide firmly that it is protection, not electricity performing parlour tricks. A rainbow signs a contract no lawyer would draft. A sudden hush of wind is either a blessing or a rehearsal. You treat it as both and tighten the lashings. The saints have specialties no guild could improve. Nicholas hauls men from water as if the sea were poorly organised. Erasmus Elmo lights masts to say seen. Brendan charts courage, which is always slightly off the map. Clement mines anchors. Ulrich mines shipwrecks, preferably by preventing them. Shrines near harbours keep their receipts. Carved ships, silver anchors, ragged curls of rope, coins wedded to candle stubs. Promises are recorded in wax, because wax remembers gently. Devotion and superstition sit at the same table and share bread. Hair and nails are left alone at sea. The waves have opinions on grooming. Dolphins get greetings. Sharks get theology. Women aboard are called bad luck by men whose luck wears aprons and mend nets. Figureheads argue the point continuously and in silence. The wind is addressed as sir or madam depending on temperament. Storms are cursed and immediately apologised to, diplomacy, but with clouds. There is of course commerce in piety. A captain pledges a candle as tall as a man if spared. On return, a thrifty cousin is sent to measure the shortest man in town. The saints do not audit, but they notice. Votive tablets bloom in chapels, painted ships tossed like toys, a saint's hand large as mercy holding them up. Names are written in shaky letters by people who have learned how brief a name may be. Death is a regular visitor and a solemn professional. The body is sewn into sailcloth. The last stitch passes through the nose to ensure all business is concluded. A stone is tied at the feet. Prayers are said. Bells toll if bells are available. Failing bells, voices reach for a tone that feels like brass. The sea accepts with ceremony of its own. No speech, own gravity. In port, candles multiply. Masses are commissioned. and stories are told carefully so they don't break. Chapel walls grow crowded with little ships that mean thank you and we remember in the same small language. Homecoming rehearses joy as liturgy. Men go barefoot to shrines because gratitude prefers discomfort to eloquence. Wives hang ribbons on saints they negotiated with in the dark. Children parade medals not originally theirs. The feast that follows is half Thanksgiving, half inventory. Who returned, who didn't, and how to set places next time. No one says miracle, everyone behaves as if one has occurred. Faith seeps into carpentry and provisioning. Nets are sprinkled in spring, boats are blessed, which is excellent for morale and pitch adhesion. The blacksmith crosses tongs before drawing sparks. Coopers finish a barrel with a whispered enough. The rope maker ties the last splice and breathes on it like a prayer. Sailors claim they to tell who made a line by the way it listens in a gale. You may suspect exaggeration. The rope does not. In every port a small economy blooms around the anxious. There are candles sized by outcome. Safe crossing, quick crossing, contrite crossing. There are medals for storms, for pirates, for customs officials. There is a man who swears he sells pieces of the true sail. The bishop coughs. Business continues. A shrewd buyer acquires 3 trinkets from different saints, not because heaven competes, but because sailors hedge. Doctrine and deck talk are introduced carefully. A theologian might explain providence. A boatswain replies that providence tightens knots better after a hymn. No one argues long storms cut debates short. On quiet nights, the catechism expands to include the practical. The mercy of a fair wind, the justice of well-distributed rations, the mystery of why rats prefer the captain's cabin. Grace is counted in inches of freeboard. Storm prayers have their own meter. Nicholas, save us. Mary, guide us. Anyone listening now would be excellent. They are shouted into wind that shreds syllables and still somehow arrives intact. Oaths get braided with psalms. Nobody minds the theology. When the gale passes, thanks is said with the same urgency, because gratitude, unlike courage, is best done immediately. Night watch teaches a private religion that needs no witness. Stars hammer the sky with 1 billion precise opinions. A man begins to feel small in a useful way. The Milky Way looks like spilled salt. Someone says not to waste it. Someone else laughs softly and keeps the joke for years. Phosphorescence writes brief scripture along the hull. The helmsman holds course and discovers that faith feels a lot like not overcorrecting. Even luck learns its manners. Dice clatter in off hours. A man who wins too much buys the next round on principle, lest fortune think him greedy. The share out after landfall includes the chapel's cut. Nobody calls it a tax. A captain who forgets his vow acquires a leaky seam he can't locate until he remembers the candle and lights it. The leak, of course, stops for reasons that will satisfy neither carpenter nor skeptic, which is precisely the point. Children learn all this as naturally as breathing. They recite winds as if they were cousins, learn to spit twice and cross once, and to spot a false relic at 10 paces, unless they are buying it for their father, in which case charity overrides discernment. Their first night aboard is a ceremony. Their first storm is a catechism. Their first safe return is a creed. When plague or war keeps ships on their moorings, faith idles uneasily. Chapels are full, harbours are quiet, nets dry like folded hands. Then a cautious voyage creeps out, muttering apologies to saints and weather both. Another follows. The bells remember how to ring departures, the docks remember how to echo, the saints remember the names. Business resumes, which is the laity's preferred miracle. Festivals put a bright edge on reverence. Fleets are blessed in a row, prows wear flowers and a little swagger. Candle boats drift like a small galaxy under bridges. Even the taverns lean out to watch. Someone wins the rope hauling contest by remembering to breathe. He donates his prize to the shrine and tells the story backwards for years. And always there is the quiet arithmetic of courage. Faith is as a shield that deflects waves. It is ballast that keeps the keel honest. It lives in knots tied twice, in promises kept after landfall, in the habit of thanks that outlasts fear by 1 minute and therefore wins. The sea stays wild, God stays God, and the sailor keeps going, which is the unflashy miracle the coast depends on. So call it superstition if you need to. Sailors will nod and keep their medals. Call it devotion, they will nod and keep their knives sharp. On decks that move and under skies that don't, the mariner's faith is tool and tail, compass and company, weight enough in the right place to carry hope across water that never once promised to be kind. Stand at the edge of a medieval harbour after the day has put its noise away, and you'll see how the sea runs the place without ever bothering to hold office. Gulls turn the volume down, sails relax into the kind of slouch only canvas may manage, and tar and salt linger because nobody invited them to leave. Out beyond the bay, the horizon keeps its usual secret. Ships still move out there, fishing boats sneaking home, cogs with ambitions, pilgrim craft negotiating with God, because the sea, tireless manager, never clocks out. To locals, the ocean isn't background, it's the headmaster with a long memory. It requires skill from shipwright and sailor, and accepts late work in storms with penalties. It stitches hamlets to cities, marches grain to other people's tables, and redistributes wool, wine, salt and timber like a taxman with a boat. It brings relics and spices, merchants' ledgers and kings' problems, cleverly introducing neighbours who weren't sure they wanted to meet. Humility comes complimentary. Ships vanish between two Ave Marias. Pirates emerge from fog like auditors. Illness practices crowd control. Families keep watch on cliffs, translating grey water into maybes until the eyes quit. The sea's gifts come with teeth. Everybody learns to smile carefully. The result is it despair, but that sturdy style of hope that wears boots and doesn't explain itself. Faith ties itself to every rope. Sailors kiss amulets and then climb anyway, which is the point. Hymns face lightning with admirable optimism. On shore, candles argue with wind and occasionally win a case. A safe return is noted as miracle. A loss receives ritual and names spoken properly. Chapel walls acquire painted storms with helpful saints in the margins because memory likes illustrations, and bells toll for both the drowned and the still travelling, equitable to a fault. Commerce, meanwhile, converts water into roads and conversation into invoices. English wool turns up in Flemish looms pretending it planned the trip. Gascon wine discovers London is very thirsty. Baltic timber keeps cathedrals honest about physics. Markets thicken, coins develop personalities, and cities look surprised at their own prosperity. Pilgrims borrow the same lanes for reasons that don't balance books, and kings rehearse their grievances on piers large enough to hold a speech. The sea multitasks: market, highway, battlefield, chapel, 4 hats, 1 tide. Listen, and the place has a soundboard. Shipyards rasp like forests reconsidered, ropes creak in complete sentences, waves keep a very old metronome, merchants and minstrels audition for each other, prayers braid themselves into the fatigue and stay there. The air is a stew-pitch, salt fish spice smoke, sweat served hot and without apology. The wind is agreeable when flattered, and educational when ignored. Standing inside all this, one life shrinks to correct proportions, which is oddly comforting. Wonder insists on a seat. A fisherman who never loses sight of his bay, knows his tide, shakes hands with shores he'll never see. A pilgrim, under foreign constellations, discovers smallness and enlargement can be the same event. A merchant holds pepper or silk, and realizes the map has always been bigger than the family story allowed. Even the hop to the next port expands the mind 2 sizes, which is frankly untidy but useful. The harbour keeps its cast of minor saints and practical sinners. A rope marker knots distances by habit and calls it wisdom. No one argues. A cooper listens to drying staves like a doctor with better patience. A scribe inventories cargo until ink believes in ships. A widow rents a room over a lane that smells of fish and ambition. Children learn the difference between bell for storm and bell for grace, an exam with no retakes. Light behaves itself when asked politely. Lanterns bloom along the quays like a cautious constellation. Stars file their ancient paperwork overhead. A watchman leans on a pike, practicing the art of noticing nothing until it matters. Far out, a masthead lamp swings its small opinion against a very large dark, and somehow that's enough. The tide lifts hulls with the same patience it uses on moons and men. Memory here is a physical object. Nets remember hands, keels remember reefs, a knife handle keeps the story of a sturgeon that wasn't modest. The pier knows the names of boots it has held, and the tavern beam counts the seasons by the notch of a lucky crew's returns. Even the wind has a filing system. Salt for homeward, iron for weather, clove for the ship that came late and paid early. There are lessons, of course office hours posted nowhere. Plan carefully. The sea applauds preparation with fewer surprises. Work hard, it notices. Pray humbly, it doesn't mind being asked. Step out anyway. Certainty is decorative and breaks in transit. Risk buys connection wholesale and throws in meaning for free. The sea, being a mirror with waves, reflects life as generous, dangerous, beautiful, and allergic to control. The city takes notes. Guild halls raise roofs paid for in tides. Hospitals warm their halls with whale oil somebody risked too much to render. Cloisters copy maps into brighter guesses. Courts argue salvage with passion and precedent, and then quietly split the difference. Everyone pretend this is normal, which astonishingly makes it so. War passes through like weather with banners. The harbour becomes choreography, drums, signals, platforms for archers, a brand new respect for the virtues of water. Men take sea legs or fail spectacularly. Either way the fleet departs. It returns lighter in certain names, heavier in stories, and the quay learns a few more kinds of silence. And the small lives persist, which is the whole trick. A baker sets dough by a window that smells of tar and cinnamon, and says nothing profound. A girl counts masts instead of sheep. A boy learns 3 knots and 1 prayer and decides both will do. A cat edits the dock rat's reviews are mixed. These are the stitches that keep the larger cloth from unravelling. Even the dead are busy. Names ride on votive boards, masses carry them like discreet ferries. A bell speaks exactly enough times. A widow's candle lists a little and refuses to go out. The sea accepts the body, and not being cruel so much as thorough, keeps the secret. The town answers with bread, a bench moved closer to the hearth, and a story retold until it warms. Maps improve the way gossip does, by circulation. Portolans collect wind roses and confident lines. Pilots add pencil truths and leave ink to optimists. Compasses behave, mostly. Astrolabes pretend the deck is steady. Sailors pretend to believe them. Navigation remains a cocktail of memory, mathematics, and prayer, stirred by weather. Results usually adequate. By now the last lanterns are doing their modest best. Halyards tick polite remarks against masts. Waves negotiate with quaystones in the old language. Crews fold themselves into sleep because dawn has unreasonable hours. Out past the roadstead, ships move like discreet stars, confident enough not to brag. So the medieval sea continues, not just in timber and sail, but in the human habit of leaving and returning, of trading and promising, of praying over what can't be planned and trusting what can. Tomorrow will open its ledger. Wind will sign wherever it likes. We will measure, mend, bless, and shove off. And the horizon, professional as ever, will keep its distance while letting us think we're closing it.